and as you can see, I'm chairman of this committee. If I could introduce you to our senior team, I have next to me Mike Garrity, Head of Planning. On the other side, I have Hannah Massey, who is our legal support this morning, and Megan Rochester, who is our committee support officer. The planning officers I will introduce as we go through each application. I'd also like to thank the officers around the room who are making today possible, particularly with the IT. And I'm very pleased to welcome members of the public to our meeting to listen to the debate and decisions being taken this morning, and that you'll have the opportunity to address the committee directly in accordance with our procedures, which can be found on the website. Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and a copy of the recording will be available on the website afterwards. And by attending this meeting, you do consent to being filmed. Please ensure that your mobile phones and any other electronic equipment are switched off or turned to silent. And please also be aware of any trip hazards that are around the room as you move around. So moving on to the agenda this morning, everybody. Item 1, apologies for absence, please.
Morning, Chairman. We've received apologies for absence from Councillors Worth, Took and Dyer.
Thank you very much. Do I have at this stage any declarations of pecuniary or other conflict of interest, bias or predetermination? Bill.
In respect of...
Can you turn your microphone on and say your
Sorry.
name and which ward you represent?
Sorry. Bill Trout, representing Swanage Ward. I think it's item 6 and 7 on the agenda. I am self-declared predetermined on those applications. Consequently, when item 6 commences, I will withdraw to the public seats. And after speaking as a ward member, I will withdraw from the room until the end of item 7.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Julie, again, name and ward.
Councillor Julie Robinson, Ferndown South, covering Longham. I'm predetermined on item 9, so I will be doing the same as Councillor Trite.
That's lovely, thank you. And of course, I will allow you both to speak as local members. Thank you. If any other member feels that something comes apparent during the meeting, as soon as you are aware of that, please let us know and we'll deal with it accordingly at that time. Item 3 on the agenda are the minutes of the last meeting, and they've been circulated to members in advance and published on the website. Are you happy that I sign them as a true record at the end of the meeting? Yep. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to public participation, can I remind members of the public that this is a meeting held in public and not a public meeting, and only those who have registered to speak will be allowed to address the committee. The first 3 members of the public, including any community or amenity group who have registered to speak for and against the application, including the applicant or their representative, will be invited to address the committee. If the applicant or their representative registers to speak, then only the first 2 members of the public who wish to speak for the application may address the committee, and that's in support of the application. MPs need to register in the same way and will count towards the 6 speakers. Town and parish councils and ward members of Dorset Council who are not members of this committee and who wish to address us will be allowed to speak, providing they have given due notice. All requests have to have been registered with Democratic Services by 8:30 AM on Monday, the 23rd of October. And each speaker is strictly limited to 3 minutes, although when we come to the first 2 applications, the PMU flats and Swanage, there's a slight amendment to that, and I'll give you the reasons for that when we get to it. Once the public speakers have spoken, that is your one and only chance to take part in the debate. I will not take any heckling in the nicest possible way from members of the audience. Thank you. So moving on to the schedule of planning applications, we have 6 before us this morning. Have there been any requests for deferral or withdrawal, please? That was a tacit no, thank you. You're allowed to speak. Background information relating to the applications have been made available for inspection by members prior to the meeting. and that covers consultations, objections and representations, as well as the East Dorset and Purbeck local plans and the council's related policies. For each item, I will invite the case officer to introduce the item. Then the members of the public, planning agents, applicants and town and parish councils who have registered to speak will be allowed to address the committee in the following order: public against the application, public in support, the applicant's agent, town or parish council, and then the local member. Following the public participation of every section, I will ask the officers if there are any salient points that they wish to clarify. We'll then open up to members of the committee for questions and debate. In order to run the meeting smoothly, may I request the members of the committee direct any remarks and questions through me, and I'll invite you to speak in turn. Can you also remind members that you do need to say who you are and the ward you represent for the benefit of those listening online. Can you please keep your microphones on mute and ensure your device volume is set to 0 again? As you can see, it does make a big difference to the audio quality. And also, when you are talking, please use the desk microphone. For the members of the public, when you approach the desk there, you'll see that there's a button on the front. When you press it, the light goes red, and that makes you live on the system. And when you finish speaking, if you can then press it again to turn it off, I'll be very grateful. Thank you. So we're now going to move on to the presentations. I was going to say there might be a short gap, but it looks like the presentation is already loaded ready for us. So item 6 and item 7 are the Pierview flats in Seymour Road, Swanage. As you'll see, we have 2 applications for the same site. One is the planning application and the second one is the listed building application. For efficiency purposes, we will take the 2 together, but at the end of the debate, there will be 2 recommendations. Because of the fact there are 2 applications, I'm extending the 3-minute public speaking to 6 minutes for each applicant, as they're entitled to speak for 3 minutes on each of the applications. So we'll just put it all together and do it as one, but make 2 decisions at the end. So Liz Adams is the presenting officer on this. So over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, members. So this application returns to the Planning Committee following site visits by each of you, and because some members were not previously present at the last meeting, it is necessary for me to rerun the presentation so that all members present have received the same information. Although, since you all know, you've all undertaken the site visit, so you're all aware of the context, so I will try to keep that light, as it were. The proposal is for the construction of a replacement bin store within the curtilage of the Royal Victoria and Pierview apartments in the town of Swanage. And as we said before, the application follows pre-application advice in which officers and including Conservation and Waste team were involved. It was prompted by a letter from the Dorset Council's waste collection team advising the Royal Victoria Residents Association that the existing bin store, which has been in use for over 40 years, is no longer acceptable for the collection of waste. The risk assessment undertaken by the waste collection team has identified that the access steps that are currently in place down to the store, together with the collection of waste from many small containers and bags, poses an unacceptable health and safety risk. As you're aware from the site visit, the application site lies within the garden, and there's also the parking court of the Grade 2 listed buildings, the former Royal Victoria Hotel to the north, and is that the north? Yeah, sorry, and Grade 2 listed Pierview apartments to the east here. Both planning permission and listed building consent has been sought, and the proposals have been the subject of extensive negotiation and amendment at both pre-application and application stage. As you saw on site, it's very constrained, particularly from a planning perspective, because we are within the conservation area and we have the context of the listed buildings. We're also in the Dorset AONB. Public right-of-way extends through the parking court connecting Marshall Row with Seymour Road, and you saw on site that there were bollards to prevent vehicles using the area as a cut-through. So the land on which the bin store is to be sited is owned by the Pierview residents, on whom notice has been served. The bin store is intended to serve both the Royal Victoria and Clearview flats, so that's 27 flats in all. Parts of the southern parking court are in separate ownership, which you can see down here, they're outside the red line. The desire to maintain access and parking spaces and to minimise the impact on the heritage assets has limited the options for relocation of the bin store. It's been proposed to adapt and extend the existing store within the garden of Clearview flats, as you can see in blue here. So you'll recall the hillside setting from visiting the site. The garden slopes gently upwards from north to south, and a tall southern boundary wall here, also serving as a retaining wall to the high level parking court to the south. Now, the garden is overlooked by flats it serves and also the dwelling of Peters Hole to the west. It's currently accessed by the steps that we all went down and a pedestrian gate in its southeast corner. The existing flat roof bin store that is located directly to the southeast of Peters Hole is accessed by, by steps and parking. You knew that already, I apologise. Following my script there. So these photos are from within the Clearview Gardens, which we all stood in. They look south towards the car park, and we all observe the land level differences. The new bin store will extend and replace the existing. The roof is to be removed from the existing, and it's to be adapted to provide a level access to and from the parking court. So these are the plans that you are now familiar with, where we see the level access. So the steps are replaced with a wider level access. The existing bin store becomes an access into the new bin store with new raised beds. And the new bin store is 9.2 metres in length by 3.6 metres in depth. The intention is that this will provide space for large bin provision that will meet the wider range of the residents' waste and recycling requirements. The bin store is to be enclosed by the existing Purbeck stone wall that serves along the edge of the car park. A new double metal access gate is proposed, which will be used on collection day. And within the Clearview garden, the finished floor level of the bin store will be raised by approximately 1 metre above the garden ground level with a ventilated void below. There'll be a new cement rendered wall with stone topping to enclose the store on the north, east and west sides. And then water will drain into pipe the eastern end of the bin store. And then planting boxes will be included on the new wall to try and soften the impact. So the Royal Victoria Hotel and the Clearview Apartments positively contribute to the special character and the local distinctiveness of the Swanage Conservation Area. The Conservation Officer has been fully involved in the scheme at pre-application and application stage, and they have advised that although the proposed bin store is large and it will be sited in the grounds of the listed building, due to the site gradients and the existing boundary stone wall, the store will not be overly visible within the conservation area and therefore isn't anticipated to cause harm to the conservation area. In respect to the setting of the buildings that are listed, including Peters Hole, which is listed by association, as we explained before, the Conservation Officer considers that due to the size and potential for some odours, there will be less than substantial harm caused. So members need to consider whether the benefits of the scheme would outweigh that harm, as required by paragraph 202 of the National Planning Policy Framework. So officers have identified a public benefit because of the need for new bin storage facilities. The apartments in that area have been served by the bin store very faithfully, but with changes and with the increase in apartments in the area of Swanage, bins have become an issue, and there is a need for careful consideration of how waste is dealt with in these areas of high density and the tight grain of the historic centres, where we want to try and avoid having lots of bins on the high street, on the streets. To date, the bin store has been the only available storage facility for 35 units, including the Hardy Court properties, which are to the south of the car parking area. And it's only been able to accommodate small bins or the collection of plastic sacks of refuse, which have to be carried up the steps on bin collection day. So there's no level space for wheelie bins, and this situation needs to be resolved for the health and safety reasons mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So the proposed bin store is to be shared by the 27 units, but not the Hardy Court properties, which will need to find alternative waste provision. This is a summary of the proposed capacity, and when compared to the capacity identified by the waste management team, there is a deficit. So this is in greater detail in paragraphs 16 to 31 of your report. So there is a deficit in respect of one large refuse bin, one large recycling bin, and two smaller glass bins. The waste operations manager has therefore confirmed that notwithstanding the improvements to be able to store and collect the bins, he's unable to support the proposal because there's insufficient space to accommodate all the bins that they identify as being needed. Your planning officers have carefully considered the deficit in provision and note that whilst this is not an ideal situation, the heritage and neighbour amenity constraints of the site mean that that a bin store of increased size in this location would be likely to cause more harm. The new store will address the accessibility issues on collection day and significantly increase the capacity for screened bin storage. No historic planning conditions have been identified which would prevent bins being placed elsewhere on the site, and as there's a need to store bins somewhere, there is the potential that greater harm could be caused to heritage setting and to neighbour amenity from placing bins in other positions. As such, officers consider that despite the deficit, this would achieve a betterment compared to the existing situation and would outweigh the harm arising to the setting of the listed buildings. So it is recognised that other solutions will need to be found for additional bin storage for Hardy Court and any potential additional bins if the waste management collection figures are correct. In terms of impact on neighbouring amenity, this has been a critical matter raised by Swanage Town Council, the local ward members and neighbours. The concerns include loss of privacy, loss of light and outlook, impacting on noise, additional odour, vermin and antisocial behaviour, such as increased littering, and they've also considered that other potential options might be available. Letters of support were, however, received from several occupants of Royal Victoria Apartments and Peerview flats. So, as we all know, to date, the bin store has been roofed, and that has trapped odours. But due to the need for level access, and because there's no opportunity to provide a roofed or a higher roof building that would cause harm to character of the conservation area and harm to the setting of listed buildings, as well as potentially an overbearing impact on neighbours, the proposal is to remove the roof and raise the floor level, providing an open bin store. The council's public health team has advised they do not have any specific guidance on the location of bin stores. While some additional noise and odour may arise as a result of the proposal, it's noted that the store is intended to provide space for the larger bins with the lids, which should reduce odour and access by vermin. The bin store will be screened from the car park by the existing wall against which there are existing parking spaces and will be closed off by a gate. So officers consider the likelihood of attracting rubbish from passers-by is quite low. The open nature of the store would encourage any odours escaping to dissipate. And at pre-application stage, one of the suggestions was to continue to use the existing store without the roof for bins, which would have provided extra capacity. But this was rejected in favour of moving bins further away from Peter's Hole. Have also sought to obscure neighbours' views of the bin store by way of retention of the existing southern boundary wall, in-wall planting boxes on the northern boundary wall, and the provision of a deep raised flower bed adjacent to the pedestrian access. Storage within an enclosed compound screened by the existing boundary wall is judged preferable to storage in the parking court, which would also be close to Peter's Hole. Officers consider that the revised plans seek to address harm to neighbouring outlook as best as possible. On-site members would have noticed that Peter's Hole, the detached cottage adjacent to the site, is located approximately 3 metres to the west of the pier view garden wall and within 1 metre of the existing bin store. As the closest neighbouring property, the occupants are most likely to be affected by the proposals. The finished floor level of the ground floor Peters Hole is similar to that of Pier View Garden. The parking court to the south is at a raised level, as we saw, about metre higher. There is an existing level of mutual overlooking between Peters Hole and the neighbouring amenity areas and the parking court with the public right of way through it. The property is served by ground and first floor windows on its southern elevation, which face onto the parking courtyard, and east elevation windows facing onto Pier View Garden. The existing bin store is directly to the southeast of these windows, with a flat roof currently preventing loss of privacy. But there is some loss of privacy to windows from the cottage arising from residential use of the courtyard and the public footpath. The members will have noted that the boundary wall between Pier View Gardens and Peters Hole is sufficiently low to allow limited overlooking, and this will be exacerbated by the introduction of steps. I think there's sort of 2 steps adjacent to this wall before you get the screening effect of the existing bin store. The wall belongs to Peters Hole, so it's not been included within the application site, and it's not possible to impose a condition requiring additional screening. But there would be options for the owner to introduce planting or apply to increase the height of the wall if they judged that their amenity was compromised, should permission be granted. It's recognised that the new access route will increase activity close to the south-facing walls, windows, and particularly on bin collection days, the elevated position would facilitate some overlooking by collectors going in and out of the bin store. But this will be of a transient nature as people go up the steps to put the rubbish out, and there's bin men coming up. So people go in and out to collect the rubbish. The introduction of the raised planting beds within the existing bin store would reduce or at least restrict direct overlooking into the garden of Peters Hole. And once vegetation is established, that would help to screen views from the south-facing windows. So officers consider that the use of the bin store would not result in an additional level of harm to local or neighbouring amenity, including loss of privacy and overlooking, that would justify refusal of the proposal, subject to the conditions already mentioned, and a lighting condition, which is number 5 in your agenda. And in summary, subject to the conditions in the officer report, the proposed development is considered to offer the opportunity to secure a bin store facility, which is operationally a significant improvement on the existing unworkable arrangement, whilst avoiding harm to the conservation area and limiting the degree of harm to the setting of listed buildings and neighbouring amenity. So on balance, the public benefits are judged to outweigh the harm, and as such, the proposal is considered to accord with the Purbeck and Swanage local planning policies. Officer recommendation is therefore to grant planning permission subject to conditions. Madam Chair, would you like me to continue to the listed building?
Yes, please.
So the associated listed building application is therefore a more narrow consideration of the impacts on the listed buildings and the setting of the listed buildings. And as previously explained, we have identified less than substantial harm to the setting of the listed buildings from the size of the proposed bin store and to the way that you experience the listed buildings where you might get some odours arising. However, as previously explained, officers consider that there is a public benefit that would outweigh the level of harm identified, and therefore, again, it's a recommendation of approval. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Liz. Okay, I'm now going to move on to our public speakers, and I'd like to welcome back Andrew Joy, who is our one public speaker on this, apart from the local member. As I said earlier, you have 6 minutes to speak to both applications.
Chairman and members, thank you for.
Just turn your microphone on, please. Thank you.
I'll reset. Chairman and members, thank you for finding time to visit and appreciate this special setting within the Swanage Conservation Area Unfortunately, the site was not marked out. The applications are a response to the waste team's risk assessment that the access steps to the existing store, together with a collection of many small containers, pose a health and safety risk to collections. It's worrying that the proposals instead require the residents to climb steps, probably with separate containers, and to open large industrial bins at a higher level, arguably introducing a greater health and safety risk. I hope you agree that Petershull is a special 17th century Purbeck stone house listed by association to the Grade 2 buildings. You will have seen that the current enclosed bin store is in a remote corner of Pierview Gardens, but in anything but a remote corner of Petershull. It was for that reason that when both the apartments and Petershull were restored and modernised in the late 70s, the bin store was enclosed and built with a flat roof to minimise visual, privacy, odour and vermin impact, serving the apartments without incident ever since. We understand the need to accommodate new waste streams, but the waste team's one-size-fits-all methodology assumes long-term residential occupation and a standardised waste mix. Over 60% of the apartments are short-term holiday lets or occasionally occupied second homes and were created as such through planning. The methodology has no flexibility for these differences. The volume and mix will be radically less and different in most respects to the waste team's model. We strongly object to the current proposal as a substantial over-provision. It's unclear whether the site visit took account of the existing waste bin provision at the front entrance of the Royal Victoria apartments. This proposal means that residents of around 27 flats will all take waste to exposed bins at an elevated street level point within 3 metres of the living room and bedroom windows of Petershull. The site visit revealed that anyone accessing the waste area will have a direct, close and full view of both its secluded east side and south courtyard front gardens. Those who visited Petershull, including those who took a brief opportunity to sit down, will appreciate how highly damaging this will be in terms of loss of privacy and amenity. We strongly object. It also proposes wide metal street level gates at Hardy Court at the same southeast corner, close to and on a similar level to the main bedroom. This further erodes privacy and adds noise and intrusion. We strongly object to its incongruous design in the right-of-way and conservation scene and re-emphasise our view that the proposal should be considered to cause substantial harm to the setting of Petershull and is therefore not acceptable. The proposal also describes the waste collection gate as a pedestrian gate. This is misleading. There is no right of access for Royal Victoria residents through the gardens to Marshall Row. Planting on the proposed raised bed area cannot adequately mitigate the loss of privacy, and anything substantial would overshadow Petershull Gardens. The proposed open street level compound behind the boundary wall introduces a substantial risk to environmental health, a risk of further pollution and contamination by either fly tipping or random discard by passers-by, especially of dog and food waste, would foster an increase of airborne and other vermin and have an adverse visual and ambience impact on the public right-of-way footpaths to the Downs. Much reference is made to the history and listing status of the apartments and by association Petershull. And whilst the conservation officer has formed a balanced view that the effect of the proposals overall would constitute less than substantial harm, Section 16 of the NPPF, conserving and enhancing the historic environment, directs that great weight should be given to the conservation of the designated heritage assets, irrespective of whether any potential harm amounts to substantial harm, total loss, or less than substantial harm to its significance. The effect of an application on the significance of non-designated heritage assets should also be taken into account. We're not convinced that the substantial restoration and conservation of Petershull since 1979 and its setting in recognition of its 17th century heritage has been sufficiently taken into account. The openly exposed waste storage proposed, whilst increasing capacity to approximately 30 feet by 12, or about half the size of the entire backyard of the nearby White Horse pub, is unquestionably detrimental to the garden and conservation setting of the apartments and flats, particularly within their own curtilage. It is regrettable that despite repeated requests by neighbours, there's been no consultation whatsoever in preparation of plans. This would have provided and could still provide opportunity to consider a compound at the current ground level with a simple platform lift, all at substantially lower cost, with scope to be less intrusive, less prone to indiscriminate fly tipping, and explore viable forms of roofing, reducing both visual impact within the garden and more effectively encourage burning trees. We maintain and re-emphasise our objections for all the reasons given and ask you to provide opportunity for further constructive discussion with the applicant and on balance, therefore refuse both applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please be kind. Is there anything that you wish to refer to from the public speaker?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Elizabeth Adams. Just to draw to members' attention that the gates that were mentioned there are subject to the proposed condition 4 of the listed building consent, so that we receive details of those prior to their installation. There was mention that they're called pedestrian gates, that was purely to distinguish between vehicular access. They would not be intended for it to be used by any vehicles. Officers would agree that great weight does need to be given to harmed heritage assets, definitely. But in this instance, we're looking at a scenario where there's a given need for public, there's a need for the bins to be accommodated in some shape or form. And this is considered to be the sort of least worst option, if you like. And just to pick up on the lift suggestion, Dorset Waste requirements are for a level access.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to move on to the members. And my first speaker is Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Oh, sorry. Yes, my sincere apologies, Bill. As local member.
I believe that there's a speaker from Swanage Town Council.
No one has asked to speak. So, again, Bill, you have 6 minutes to speak to the committee.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Yet again, I would ask the committee to consider carefully the repeated views of Swanage Town Council in these two applications. Now, no group of people is infallible, but no group of people has a better understanding of what suits the town best than the Town Council. And that includes an understanding of quirky features and unique eccentricities, as well as general needs, preferences and suitabilities. It's true that minor amendments have been made to this proposal over the last couple of years, but nothing of significance to mitigate the Town Council's original serious concerns set out first in November last year. Thus, an open store with more and larger bins is not environmentally appropriate in this location. The bigger waste bins would be exposed, potentially attracting more waste and rubbish from surrounding houses, businesses and passers-by. Vermin and pests would be more of a nuisance, including seagulls, and there are enough of those around in Swanage at the moment, I can assure you. And bad smells would be more of a problem than now, especially in the summertime, when use would increase exponentially, because most dwellings using the bins are second homes or holiday lets. That smell is already bad enough at the height of summer. Raising the floor of the new bin store and removing the present roof would put this facility within a couple of meters of the nearby property at number 2 Marshall Row and its courtyard garden. This was particularly noticeable at the site visit and would be highly detrimental to the amenity of this house's residents by way of direct and constant overlooking from users of the bin store. The proposals are certainly out of keeping with the character of this part of Swanage, and they detract from the appearance of the listed building and its setting within the Swanage Conservation Area. There are also more suitable areas within the curtilage to locate a new bin store, although this and the health and safety review by Dorset Council waste team are not, I understand, pertinent to this committee's planning considerations. The key substantial objections are therefore to the loss of privacy, adverse environmental health impacts, the encouragement of additional rubbish and waste, and its inappropriate location at this point in Swanage. I fully endorsed Mr. Joy's remarks and would emphasise how Section 16 of the NPPF supports, and I quote, the conserving and enhancing of the historic environment, which this certainly is. Much weight should be given to heritage assets, and it's simply not good enough, in my view, simply to say the harm is less than substantial. If you're going to say something like that, you need to quantify it. And I've never heard it quantified yet. I don't know how you do that, but it certainly needs more than just a bold statement like that. I would urge the committee not to inflict this bin store, this new bin store, on the local community. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Bert, and my apologies for jumping ahead.
No, that's
Liz, is there anything you wish to respond to the comments made by the local member?
Okay, just 1 minute, please, Annie. I would, yes, from an office perspective, I'd just like to respond to Councillor Tright's reference to the difference between substantial harm and less than substantial harm. So the National Planning Policy Framework identifies these as two categories of harm. So substantial harm would usually be considered to be going to the heart of the reason for the listing of the building. So it would often be to do with loss of fabric that is integral to the value of the building, or something that is so detrimental to its setting that it means you would no longer be able to maintain an understanding of the historic significance of the building. Or it might be a total loss of the building. So just to try and to explain to members the difference between less than substantial, which is quite a broad definition, as it were, but the substantial harm would be for the reason I've just outlined. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now having had all of the public speaks, and my apologies for that, shall I move on to the committee? And again, my first speaker is Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got several questions. The first one is, why is the bin store not being built to the size to accommodate the capacity needs? When we look at the photo and the slide and we did the site visit, there is obviously sufficient land to accommodate a bin store of the sufficient size that's needed. I noticed that there is a greenhouse and a shed. I think it was slide 8, I think it was. Is it necessary that they would need to be moved to accommodate a bin size area to accommodate that sort of need?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Elizabeth Adams here. We have an application before us. The applicants have tried to explain why they've come to this design. In part, it's to try and avoid additional harm to the conservation and heritage assets. In part, I understand it's to do with land ownership, which obviously we can't take into account. And you've already heard that there's a discrepancy between the size of the bin store that the waste management team considers to be necessary and the size that residents consider to be necessary.
Do you wish to continue?
I'm just wondering, what's the distance that environmental health consider to be appropriate to put an open waste rubbish area adjacent to a residential property?
Through you, Madam Chair, Elizabeth Adams. they don't have any standing advice. I did request some comments. In this case, the bins have been moved out of the existing bin store to try and maintain some distance from the property. I think we end up with a separation distance of about 4 metres here. Public Health didn't have any, they've raised no objection, and they don't have any particular distance that they require.
I find that surprising that Environmental Health don't actually have some policy or some sort of guidance about how close you can put rubbish to an adjacent policy. So moving on to, we've talked about a bin store, and that you're saying that a roof can't be put on it because it would cause substantial harm to the area. And I really don't understand that. When we did the site visit, we looked at it, the area. Obviously, you've got a car park there with all the cars parked in it. It's a necessity of modern life. And with the arrangement of the buildings around that area, it seems to me that is that just a subjective view from the officers that it would cause substantial harm to that area? Because to my mind, with all the build stones on there, a design could come forward which would accommodate that area, would accommodate the bin store, which is a covered enclosure, without creating that much harm to the area.
You, Madam Chair, Elizabeth Adams. Obviously, we don't have a proposal with a roof before us. At pre-app stage, officers did advise that against trying to add a roof, mainly because it would result in a loss of it would significantly affect the setting of the listed building. We've already got a proposal for quite a large bin store, which is going to affect the setting, and we've said that that results in less than substantial harm. The need for the roof to be high enough for easy access would just increase the visual impact within the conservation area and close down the currently sort of open aspect within which the Royal Victoria and Pier flats are experienced.
When we look at the plan, we look at the site and the cut through the car park wall, because it's quite a substantial wall. Is the reasoning for putting the bin store in a location that we're seeing, bearing in mind the length of that garden, purely because there's already a cut through in the wall? Is it out of convenience that this plan application has come before us in the way that it has?
Through you, Madam Chair. I can't speak for the applicants in terms of their thinking, but I can say that because there is already a gap in the wall, it would mean that less of the wall would need to be removed. So that's positive from officers' perspective. I don't know, there may well be land ownership issues, and the other issue, I suppose, is potential loss of car parking from moving it. But that all seems to be slightly hypothetical because we ultimately have to determine the application that's before us.
Thank you, Joe. I just want to say that I'll speak in the debate now. Thank you. When it comes to the debate.
Okay, as you know, I don't separate questions and debates because I think it flows better and it's more natural as you become aware of things. So even if you do start debate, you do come up with more questions as people talk. So I'm more than happy to have questions and debate mixed together. So if there's anything else you want to say, as I have no other speakers yet.
Madam Chairman, having done the site visit, which was extremely informative, it was a really good site visit. I certainly got a lot more clarity around the issues and hand being on site. It was really good. And we had the first debate here, we've had the site visit, we've had the presentation again, which is, as I say, the site visit is extremely beneficial in helping that presentation. And it's left me with a lot of concerns around this application. So the material considerations within the officer's report and the recommendations, and it goes about material considerations would warrant refusal. I think that's a subjective view. It could be contrary to the officer's view, other people's views could be, and mine is. I don't think that there is sufficient weight given to the material considerations to not warrant a refusal. I think there is other mitigating things. I think the bin store doesn't conform to our own waste policy. As the bin store isn't big enough, I think that's a concern. It seems odd to me that as a council authority with a policy in terms of waste management, we're being asked to approve a plan that doesn't actually conform to our own waste policy, which I've got concern around. The area that would accommodate the design of the building of a sufficiently large enough bin store, you know, that we looked at the garden, it is extremely long. It seems that to me that there's been a convenience to put the bin store where it is because the wall. And that bin store is being put as far away from the apartments that actually create the rubbish, is then going to impact on Peter's Hole, which from a moral perspective, I've got an issue with that. I think it's, you know, you're trying to push your problem as far away as you can, it's going to impact on somebody else. The present location impacts on Peter's Hole due to a visual impact, the smell, flies, vermin, noise, and potential impact on devaluing Peter's Hole property, I would presume. So in my view, it does cause harm for the aspect of Peter's Hole, which was in the conservation area, and would be detrimental to the occupiers of Peter's Hole, with particular regards to privacy and potential substantial harm to that heritage asset in that conservation area. So, Madam Chairman, I'm afraid I can't support this application.
Thank you. Alex, again, can you remind us who you are and what you represent?
Hi, thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Brenton and I represent Upton and Litchett wards in Purbeck. When I first looked at this application, I thought that it seems very straightforward until I went on the site visit and I see there are some issues. But there's a few things I'd like to just flag up. When we went, and this wasn't a particularly hot day, I mean, it was okay. And there was, as we walked down into past the existing bin store into the garden, there was a distinct smell that is quite a enclosed, almost claustrophobic space. I'm not saying it's perfect at the moment, but looking, I mean, having been there and looking at the pictures, it's very obvious that the existing bin store is closer to Peter's Hole than the proposed one. So the application actually is moving it further away. What's the difference? Will it be another 2 meters away or 4 meters away?
Through you, Madam Chair, Elizabeth Adams. So it's currently the enclosed bin store is about 1 metre from Peter's Hole. The new bin store, it depends where you measure it from, because obviously the new bin store incorporates the old one. But if you're just looking at the area where the bins are going to be located, it's about 4 metres away.
And one other point, well, just to point out, or my things I'm thinking about, is the existing wall where the cars park up to it. That is about waist height, 1.2 perhaps meters. And it'll still be that height, won't it? I'm assuming. And you can still, the average person can still quite happily look over that wall. So there's already overlooking into the garden. The bin store will be a bit further in. Will the gate, whatever, be latched? Will it have a lock on it? Will there be some way of encouraging only people on the right to use it? It won't be like, you know, people won't feel that they can just go in and peer over even closer, will they? Will there be some sort of latch or control on it?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the details of the gate are to be secured by the condition, if that's members' decision. As planners, we wouldn't be able to require particular looking, but it would provide a visual deterrent because it's enclosing.
It's actually a keypad on the existing gate.
Thank you. I didn't spot that. What else was it? Can I just raise the issue of the proposed in-wall planting boxes, or whatever you call them? I mean, as a gardener, I know this is problematical in its own right, because you're going to have, if you build into an existing stone wall, where are you going to build in the drainage? you could end up with a sort of sump effect. But the wall surrounding the existing bin store, that won't be, I'm assuming that will not be actually reduced in height, it will stay the same height. So therefore, planting boxes would have to be built on the inside of it, which will naturally be, I would have said, at least a foot apart, 30, whatever it is, 30 centimetres deep. So you are actually bringing where people can walk to much further away again from Peter's Hole. And if there is planting, which would be, I mean, assuming lavender is a sort of bog standard, what you would put in that sort of situation, that's going to be another foot or 18 inches taller again. So there's actually going to be more screening, even if you don't put something very large in there, and you are pushing the people who may overlook into Peter's Hole garden courtyard a good foot away, probably a metre in places. Have we got any measurements on that?
Madam Chair. So the distance between the edge of the wall and the sorry, it's a bit small. That's the southern part, isn't it, of the raised plant will be about a metre. It measures off as a metre on the plan, and then just over a metre to the west.
Just from, this is an observation really, is that it has been mentioned that 35 units may have been using it up till now, whereas it's assumed that only 27 units of occupation will be using it in the future. And also that quite a lot of them are holiday or, not continually occupied places. So this idea of building some place which does not have sufficient capacity seems a bit of a red herring, because there's going to be fewer people using it and for less time, less a little bit anyway. You never know, holidaymakers might make more rubbish. So I think that is a bit of a red herring, the actual capacity. When it says the waste team are not completely happy with this, which is what I read. It's not that they're against it as such, it's just they do not think it fulfilled. That is working on full-time occupancy estimates, is it? Because that's what they have.
Madam Chair, yes, we have to assume that all of those units would be fully occupied from doing the calculations. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Could I just add to that comment that this has just made? From a planning perspective, I suppose there is that element of future use as well that could potentially happen. There may be peaks and troughs of use. If they're holiday lets, there could be periods of time when they are significantly used and others. So our waste colleagues will advise according to their assumptions about what is necessary. So, and in considering that, we note that they're still not content that there is sufficient, but it's still an improvement on what the current position is. So there is that element of improvement, but ultimately there is that potential for those units to be occupied more regularly, more frequently, and as with anything, you have to almost plan for that kind of scenario potentially. So I think that's where the waste team would be advising us on. Thank you.
So moving on from questions, nobody's going to be happy with this. Some people don't say it's big enough. Some people say it's too big. Some people say it should be at a different place in the garden, but it isn't actually moving the rubbish nearer to other properties. It's actually moving it further away from Peter's Hole. And you still have car parking zone between the properties on the south, I'm sorry, a bit upside down, the south side of this pathway. I don't think it's that bad. I think it is a sensible, though not perfect, solution. So, unlike my colleague, I think I might support this, but I do wait on other people who know more about it than me.
Thank you. My next speaker is Robin Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's Councillor Robin Cook, Stour and Vale Ward. Whoever thought this would be so complicated? I mean, when I first saw the item on the agenda, I thought it would be easy, you know, bin store, no great problem, make it a bit bigger, so on. But actually, I'm so glad we had the chance of the site visit. It's not a thing I'm in great favour of, but I think in this case it really did do some very good things from my perspective. I can see the issues around the overlooking. But anyway, question first. Have Dorset Waste given a date, a deadline when they say they will withdraw collections on this? So is there breathing space?
To you, Madam Chair. That's such a good question. I'm afraid I don't have the answer.
It's a good answer. Thank you very much indeed. I think I am not a designer, and when I'd done the site, a little plan, done the site visit, and went home and thought about it, I thought, well, it's not too bad. The current situation is absolutely not right. I can see it from all sorts of points of view, not just. I mean, I do agree with the one of the speakers' points of view about we're tailoring something to suit the organisation rather than the resident, which I think is a bit of a concern. But anyway. But I can see the issues even more sides. I mean, it wasn't a hot day when we went, but when we walked down the stairs through the gate, the odour from that was quite strong. And I would imagine the risk from vermin, etc., is probably greater with the use of plastic bags, Chairman, etc. So it's patently obvious something else needs to be done, I would think, in this modern day and age, notwithstanding what the Waste Partnership said about the access problems. But I do worry about future-proofing these sort of things because situations change and we don't know yet for sure, but there are ideas about changes in recycling and the number of bins, etc., that households are possibly going to have in the future. We don't know what the detail is yet. So it's possible we could be sitting here again in whatever length of time discussing an alternative bin store for this site. And I don't really want to see that happen. I doubt that I'd be part of that committee anyway by that time. However, there are, I'm sure, alternative options. And I think Councillor Bartlett mentioned about he was looking at maybe making it a bit larger. I think that's, you know, we're looking at what we've got here, admittedly. So I'm inclined to, at the moment, not support. Where my original thought was to support it, yeah, it's straightforward. You know, there is the alternative to put them in the yard, in the car park, etc. Not acceptable in aesthetically, not good, so on. But now thinking more about it, having looked at more of the detail, I'm not inclined to accept the opposite recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. So I've had 3 members speak so far. I don't have a firm proposal on the table and I don't have any more members wishing to speak. So unless somebody comes up with something, I will have to propose from the chair the officer recommendation to start the ball rolling. Shane.
Madam Chairman, and it was interesting listening to my other colleagues as well. And I think, you know, we know that we deal with the application that's in front of us. I think there are better things that can be done with this. I think certainly moving it from peat solid for reasons I said, we need to go back through the five things that I said. Part of my reasonings for I'm gonna propose to refuse the application. Then we go back through the 5 that I said.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My understanding was it was about the size, the impact on public health. Oh, no, sorry, that's wrong. I've got your questions rather than your thoughts. So yes, please.
Okay. So the first point was around there's no materials and considerations warrant refusal, which is subjective view when you take all of the considerations in play. The bin store doesn't conform to our own waste policy of Dorset Council, so therefore I've got a concern about supporting something that doesn't comply with our own policy, which I think would bring us to challenge. The area would accommodate the design of a building with a sufficient large enough bin store. Councillor Cook's point about future proofing. The present location impacts on Peters Hole due to a visual impact, the smell, flies, vermin, noise, and potential impact on devaluing that property of Peters Hole.
Can I remind you that financial considerations are not a material planning consideration?
In which case, in my view, I think it brings substantial harm to the property that is Peters Hole within the conservation area. And it has impacts on their privacy. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. Can I just clarify, you say conservation area? I was picking up that the point you were making was around the environmental impact on the property in terms of amenity, visual and odours, for example. You've also mentioned conservation. Is that a separate point, or is it part of the same issue?
I think it impacts on both sides, Chairman.
Is that all of your reasons? Okay. You wish to come back here?
May I clarify, please? We don't have a planning policy that requires a particular size of the bin store. So, from what you've said, you're concerned that you talked about future proofing, you talked about not conforming with our waste management policies. But please, could you clarify what you consider the harm would be in planning terms from the lack of from the scale that it is before you now? Do you understand? Does that question make sense? No. So we can't, or members wouldn't be able to refuse planning permission on the basis that the bin store is too small, because that isn't a planning plan. We have to consider what harm might arise as a result of the bin store being too small to then understand what the reason for refusal is that is being proposed. Thank you.
It is the fact that the facility that is proposed within the application doesn't conform to the policy that is Dorset Waste management policy, Dorset Waste management policy. So I think they were open to challenge, because when one part of the council in terms of dealing with waste is saying that it doesn't conform to the policy, and planning is putting something in front of us to approve that doesn't conform to a policy that's part of Dorset Council. And therefore I think that's a further challenge. And
come back in again.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. It raises some concerns in my mind, because we have a position where what is proposed before us has been, I suppose, designed taking account of some of the constraints that exist. So whilst it hasn't actually achieved the standards that the Waste Authority would expect normally, it's still an improvement on what the current position is. So it's not worsening the position as far as the waste collection. So for a reason for refusal around not meeting those standards when it's actually achieving an improvement, sort of creates in my mind a degree of conflict with actually justifying that. Should we be challenged on that? So that's for me is an area of concern that I have.
yeah, this all centres around the subject. You believe that it's an improvement, I don't. And as I said, for the reasons that I've given, and I think it is a strong enough argument on which to bring the proposal forward to the committee.
What's more?
I completely understand a reason for refusal on the basis of harm to amenity. And I understand if you want to put a reason for refusal forward on the basis of harm to the setting of listed buildings. I would advise against trying to include a third reason for refusal on the basis of insufficient provision, because we don't have a planning policy.
So what needs to be taken away from that is, okay, if there's insufficient provision, then X, Y, and Z will happen, which will result in additional harm, presumably in terms of the amenity and the conservation that are your two kind of planning issues.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Since I'm not the expert in the field and the officer is, and also come to this with a certain degree of my scrutiny head on around the policy, which in the back of my head, I'm looking at my scrutiny committee to think about whether we bring some of the scrutiny later. I will concede to what the officer has said, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So we have two reasons for refusal. One is about the impact on the privacy and amenity of Peters Hole, both in planning terms and in the heritage asset terms. I got that right. That's what you're saying. Okay. Do I have a seconder?
Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Robin.
The council Robin Cook, Sarah on the award. Yes, I'm happy to second that. I know I take exactly Councillor Bartlett's point. I mean, policy in our view should come into it and should impact upon it, but also the impact generally on the setting, because you can actually, just going back to that, when you're there in that car park, as a person in the car park, you can look over the wall, you can look into the garden towards the building that was the hotel, which is quite an attractive building with the roof windows and so on, the building, the listed building on the right. Suddenly you're going to be confronted also with this array of paladins between you and that view. You know, we've heard the view, it can't be covered, etc. But I think there is scope for it to go back to the drawing board, possibly, if that's what happens. And that's why I'm seconding Councillor Bartlett's proposal.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the proposal on the table? Is there an issue?
I just wanted to, sorry, Hannah, can you remind us who you are? Sorry, it's Hannah Massey, legal advisor. Councillor Bartlett, you're identifying that one of your grounds for refusal would be harm to the heritage assets. But are we still categorising that harm as less than substantial, which, as we know, is quite a wide ranging category? Because if we are, then we still need to consider the public benefits of the proposal and carry out that balancing exercise.
I think I'm going to ask planning officers to remind us of the two definitions of substantial and less than substantial harm, just so that you make sure that you are absolutely clear in what you're saying.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Elizabeth Adams again. So as previously explained, substantial harm to a listed, to a heritage asset would be one that's substantially detracts from your ability to appreciate its historic value. So that would usually be loss of fabric or an imposition into the setting that is so harmful that you could no longer appreciate the heritage value of the asset. Less than substantial would be any other harm that is not as damaging as what I've just described, but is still resulting in harm. So that might be reduced appreciation or something that detracts from the appreciation of the listed building in this case. Thank you.
And we take a bit of a subjective view, aren't we, whether it's substantial or less than substantial. I'm almost inclined to think it is substantial because of such a close proximity of the within the application of putting the bin store so close to Peters Hole. But probably it may be fairer to say that it's a lot less than substantial harm.
And is that coupled with the fact that the less than substantial harm is not outweighed by the public benefit, because I think you need that crucial addition.
Yes, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Doctor's happy that we've got a sound proposal.
Yeah, can I? Yes, Madam Chairman, can I just clarify, because I'm just reading the wording in the National Planning Policy Framework. It says where the development proposal will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage structure, this should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. So just for clarification then, I suppose what we're trying to establish is that you've gone through that exercise of weighing up what the public benefits of this proposal are, and you've satisfied yourself that you still think there's residual harm that isn't outweighed by those public benefits. So effectively, that's what we want to just be clear about as far as any potential reason for refusal is concerned.
Yes, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I assume the seconder is happy with that.
Thank you. Yes, very happy, Madam Chairman.
Okay, in that case. The question was whether or not we need to take a short recess just to finalise the wording, but I think that the conversation we've had publicly clarifies it enough. So just to recap, it's the reasons for refusal are the impact on Peters Hole and it's less than substantial harm that is not outweighed by the public benefit. But also the impact in both planning and heritage terms on the privacy and amenity of Peters Hole. Yeah.
Just separating immunity from vegetation.
Yeah. So
Two separate.
we have two different applications, as I said at the beginning. So that is the planning aspect. We now have the recommendation for the listed building consent. Can you put that beautiful up, the last one, just to remind members? Because you do have to make two decisions. And we will be doing two votes. There are two recommendations. So I just want to make sure that members are absolutely clear on both before I actually take a vote. Okay, so for your listed building consent, recommendation is that the impact on the heritage assets was on balance acceptable. So you need to make have a view on whether you still support the officer recommendation, or you have an alternative recommendation which could well come out of the wording of the planning application wording. Just want to have a word first, and then I'll let you in, Shane.
Please could members consider which of the heritage assets are being harmed. I think my understanding is at the moment you've identified less than substantial harm to Peters Hole, which isn't outweighed by public benefits. You also just need to check that you're happy with the impact on the setting of the two listed buildings.
So that's actually Beardview Flats and the other one you should know. I apologise. Escapes me. So Shane, you want to come back?
Thanks, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I think as it reads there, the impact on heritage assets on balance acceptable subject to conditions, then obviously I don't think it is acceptable. I don't think it's acceptable with Peters Hollow and Councillor Cook's point with Royal Victoria Apartments, with that give that's going to impact on that. So on balance, I think there is an impact on the heritage assets, which is contrary to what we should be aspiring to. So I would propose on this that we refuse.
So just for clarification, you're talking about the impact on the heritage assets of both Peters Hole, the Clearview Flats and the Victoria. Officers are happy with that. Do I have a seconder? Ben Robin? Okay, so we have two recommendations on the table for refusal. The planning application. Those in favour of refusal, please. Those against? No abstentions. So I make that 6 in favour and 1 against. Therefore, the application is refused. Moving on now to the listed building consent. Again, we have a proposal to refuse, which has been duly seconded because of the impact on the heritage assets. Those in favour of refusing the listed building consent, please. 6. Those against? 1. And therefore no abstentions. Again, that is refused by a significant majority. Thank you. We shall now move on to the next item on the agenda, and could someone ask Councillor Tribe to come back in, please? To update you, Councillor Tribes, the application were refused.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Right, so moving on with our agenda. We now move on to agenda item 8, and that is 10 Court Road, Swanage.
Madam Chairman,
Can you put your mic on, please?
sorry. Having waited outside, I've been subject to various people going in and out, and I understand that the members of the public here are overwhelmingly for one of the items a bit later on the agenda. Did say that perhaps you should have been informed at an earlier point, but I do know that some of the people here have taken time off work, and it would be much to their advantage if one particular item could be moved up the agenda, perhaps, and be taken now, because they could then leave. I thought I'd just say that the decision, of course, is not mine.
Nobody has given me any indication of which applications the members of the public are here for. Okay.
I believe it's for Longman.
What I will do is, I had been thinking about it before the meeting anyway, is application agenda item 8. There are no public speakers for that item. So what I'm happy to do is move that one to the end of the agenda, partly because that will also give Liz a break from having to do every single presentation until the last one. So we'll give her a little break right at the end. So agenda item 8 will now become the... Shane, I do understand you have to go, but...
So as long as I can, just due to a meeting clash, just for transparency.
Yeah, I understand, but you didn't have your mic on. So Councillor Bartlett does have a diary clash with another meeting, but we will endeavour to bring the meeting to a close as soon as possible so that people get on with their lives. We all have one. But as I said, I will move 10 Court Road to the end of the agenda. So now I do have public speaker for agenda. It's 9. It's 9. So I do have more public speakers for agenda item 9 than I do for item 10. So I will take them in that order, item 9 and then item 10. So one we will move on to now will be the Ringwood Road Longman application. Okay, can I check, because we are moving the agenda around, can you just show with your hand public speakers? Mandy Willis, are you here? Fantastic. Julian Sutton, thank you. And Councillor Paul Hanson-Brown from the Town Council.
He was here, Madam Chairman. I think he may have popped out, but he's here.
Josh, could you go and have a look?
This is why it's very difficult to move agendas around once you've started a meeting. Just find out for a minute. Julie, I just do not respond. So do you wish to make a statement?
Would you like me to sit over with members of the public?
I think as you've declared predetermination, it just makes it clear for everybody concerned. And then obviously I will invite you to speak as local member.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, if you'd like to start the presentation, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's Elizabeth Adams again. So this item that comes before you is a proposal to change the use of an existing car showroom to a use class E use as a bakery. The material considerations and full assessment have been provided in the officer's report, and this presentation is intended to provide context and touches on the main matters of contention. The application site is located in Longham, which comprises ribbon development along Ringwood Road heading towards Ferndown. The application site outlined in red here is lies within the green belt, but is within the village infill area that you see there in sort of purpley pink. This is identified by saved policy GBV1 of the East Dorset local plan. Within this area, saved policy GBV2 requires that development should maintain or improve the character and form of the settlement. The site has previously been used for car sales. So currently on the site there is a single building. The area around the building is hard surfaced and it has been in use for vehicle display and associated activities. The proposal is to convert the building into a bakery takeaway with internal and external seating areas for customers to consume their food on site. The building has been used as a car showroom with an ancillary office, so there's a showroom with ancillary office reception, stores, a kitchen and a rear carport. The proposal is that the customer area in the existing showroom will provide a seating area with public toilets. The server is going to be positioned at the back, and then you've got a storage preparation area and staff facilities. And then a new external door will be provided out to a bin store under the existing carport. An external customer seating area is proposed in front of the building with 8 fixed tables and benches under 2 large umbrellas. This will be surrounded by fixed barriers to demarcate the area. And here's an example of what the umbrellas might look like. Limited changes are proposed to the external elevations of the building. An existing air conditioning unit will be replaced by larger units on the rear of the building, and a new extract louver will be added to the north elevation. No changes are proposed to the blank gable on the southern elevation that faces the care home. The character of the street seen near to the application site benefits from the fields and the trees to the west of Ringwood Road, and also the landscaping around Fernhill Dementia Care Home, which is to the south. But the existing buildings and their use for car sales contribute to a commercial appearance within this context. The proposal is not judged to be harmful to visual amenity or the area's character, so has been found by officers to accord with saved policy GBV2. There are 2 Grade 2 listed buildings to the north of the site along Ringwood Road. The council's conservation officer has noted that the proposed external seating area and umbrellas would add clutter to the street scene and would have some impact on views on the listed buildings. But due to the distances involved, you've got approximately 50 metres from the site to the post office cottages, which are Grade 2 listed buildings here, and approximately 85 up to the White Hart Inn up here. So no harm to heritage assets has been identified given the existing context. Concerns have been raised about harm to highway safety and inadequate parking facilities. These issues have been responded to in the officer's report. The 15 parking spaces, which include 2 spaces for vans up here and 2 disabled spaces, and also 4 bicycle racks, exceed the requirements of 9 standard spaces identified by the council's non-residential parking guidance for commercial facilities of this type. The applicants have clarified that the area to the rear of the site, which is already hard surfaced, has not been identified as necessary for parking, but could potentially be used by staff. No objections have been raised by the highways team, and the proposal is judged to accord with parking and highway safety policies KS11 and KS12. The applicants have confirmed that the barrier around the external seating area is aesthetic rather than providing safety from vehicles that might be mismanoeuvring, but any vehicular movements would expect it to be slow moving within the car park, and there would be a curb line to provide physical demarcation. Another significant concern raised by third parties and the town council is the impact upon neighbouring properties, and it's to that issue that I'll focus on now. The closest properties are likely to be affected are 2 post office cottages previously noted to the north, which has windows facing south, including one in the first floor level. But as already established, it's approximately 50 metres away and separated by the remaining car sales showroom forecourt. To the south, Burnhill Dementia Care Building is approximately 3.5 metres from the shared boundary and has windows on its northern elevation. So here we see the windows. Unfortunately, I've been unable to provide the floor plan for you, and it may well be that the floor plan has changed over time since it was originally granted anyway. You can see these are the windows that are looking at the back of the site. These are the windows that face onto the blank flank wall of the building, and these are windows that face onto the front forecourt, where close to where the external seating area will be positioned. Due to this close proximity, a noise assessment has been provided, and this has been assessed by the council's public health team, who have agreed that it is appropriate and have recommended that the requested opening hours of 5 AM to 11 PM be reduced to avoid demonstrable harm. So it's been recognised that there is already quite a high degree of ambient noise from traffic along Ringwood Road, and that the use of the building for car sales would involve some additional noises from car movements and customers, which is not controlled by any condition. The proposed use of the building has the potential to intensify the number of visitors from customers and staff numbers, with more associated noise from low-speed vehicle movements, noise from plant associated with the use, and the provision of the outdoor seating area raises the potential for noise from conversations. The noise assessment has demonstrated that noise from new plant can be mitigated, and this would be by the installation of attenuators and an acoustic barrier, and that is, it suggested that the details are secured by condition 7. The noise assessment concludes that the impact of sound sources would be very limited for neighbouring residents. Consideration of the likely noise from people using the bakery forms part of the noise assessment, but they've had to rely on anonymous noise figures because it's just difficult to assess noise from people. So the conclusions of the noise assessment are that noise during the day and the night would not compete with traffic noise, and the noise assessment concludes that noises, although they're likely to be audible, would not be at a level which would be considered to be harmful impact by the World Health Organization. The council's public health team concur, but have advised that because there are no recognised standards for specifically analysing the noise from people, because we all talk at different levels and pitches and different behaviour. That is why the public health team has suggested that the timings are restricted, particularly the outdoor seating area, and their suggestion was that these should be restricted to daytime hours. So your planning officers, being mindful that the neighbouring occupants to the south are dementia care patients, and for whom sleep is critical, that we're recommending that the use of the outdoor seating area is limited from 8 AM to 8 PM, and the opening and delivery hours are also limited, as shown in this table. So it's anticipated that waste collection would take place to the north of the site. The majority of the parking spaces are positioned to the north, and it's considered that an 8 PM closing time would avoid noise and odour disturbance during quieter hours. Due to the proximity to the care home, it's also proposed that a construction management condition be imposed to control operating times when they're getting set up. There is a suggestion here from officers that waste and deliveries could be limited from 7 to 9. It's obviously a member's gift to decide whether that's a reasonable time frame. The applicant has confirmed that although they requested 5 AM to 11 PM for operating hours, that the proposed opening hours of 8 until 8 they could work with, and it's a matter for members to consider whether you judge that the conditions proposed would mitigate the harm to acceptable levels. And it's just worth saying again that the noise impact assessment is very clear that the levels of noise from plant and vehicle movements would not exceed harmful levels. So the main area for consideration is the use of the external areas. Just in summary, the principle of development is acceptable within the village infill area, although there will be some additional clutter created by the umbrellas and the seating area. This has been judged to be acceptable within the context of the site and in relation to heritage assets at sufficient distance to avoid harm. The impact on neighbouring amenity is considered to be acceptable, subject to the conditions which I'll list in front for you in a moment. No harm to biodiversity, and because of the previous uses of the land, there would be a proposed contamination condition, but there's no likely harm and no additional flood risk has been identified. So that's a little whistle to stop tour of the main considerations. Hopefully you'll have familiarised yourself with the conditions set out in the report. There are quite a few of them, so I've listed them there for ease. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Liz. Okay, I'm going to move on to our public speaking now, and my first speaker is Mandy Willis. Again, we'll be reverting back to our normal policy of 3 minutes.
That's fine.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, committee. Just to confirm, my name is Mandy Willis. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Long Village Resident Association. So firstly, we'd like to highlight a number of phrases used within the applicant's planning statement. Page 1, it will provide infrastructure meet the needs of the highway network. This location will meet the needs of motorists. Thirdly, users of the A348 pass on the site. Proposed development provides a role in meeting the needs of motorists, and it goes on. So I think we can all be clear that the outlet is intended to serve motorists using the road. However, policy allows only very limited development that supports the role of the settlement as a provider of services to its home community. This proposal is nothing short of a motorway-style service area that does nothing to serve the needs of the home community, and as we've already established by the applicant's own admission, is intended to serve the needs of motorists. In terms of character, a number of local and national planning policies require that infill development should be of a character that respects the village form, maintains or improves the character of the settlement whilst protecting and enhancing the heritage assets. A modern, brightly coloured and illuminated service area of this nature cannot be considered as respecting the village form, improving its character or enhancing the setting of its heritage assets. Longham is a historic village, not a motorway. The village and its surroundings contribute to the green belt by providing a welcome break from the commercialisms of the large conurbations to the north and to the south, offering green spaces and historic buildings. Given the number of similar eating establishments in the wider area, it's impossible to accept there is justification to say that the benefits outweigh the harm. So in summary, we consider it's out of character with the village is intended to serve the needs of motorists rather than those of local people. And finally, Madam Chairman, I'd just like to make some points just in case this application is considered to be granted. The simple reality is that it will be mostly workmen using the outlet during the working week. As anybody knows, our road will know it is workmen and heavy goods vehicles primarily using the road. And the 2 van spaces provided will not be sufficient. Therefore, we'd like to see a condition forcing a higher allocation of van spaces. A further reality is the fact that large vehicles will attempt to park on the highway and most likely half on the pavement, on which is a very narrow section of the road. To this end, we would request the inclusion of double yellow lines and some form of bollards to protect the pavement and verge for the safety of vulnerable road users, and also to protect the flow of traffic on what is already a very, very congested road. I would like to, if it gets to that point, to actually perhaps take a look at a Google Earth image of the highway so that you can see how narrow it is there. And finally, we welcome the recommendation that the operating hours are restricted, but we'll go further and suggest 7 until 7. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Again, beautifully timed. I'm going to go through all the public speakers first.
That's
But certainly the W lines is something we will come back to.
Yeah.
It's outside our remit basically, but I'll come back to that in more detail. My next speaker is Julian Sutton on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this fairly brief. As members will be aware, Greggs is a Class C town centre use. It's not a peer use that you find on the motorway. Before just addressing a couple of the points, I would just like to obviously draw your attention to the Greggs Pledge, which hopefully you're aware of. Greggs is a company which believes in giving back. It currently provides some 70,000 breakfasts for deprived children on a daily basis, provides 1% of its pre-tax profits to a charitable foundation, and is leading the way in matters of food waste, sustainability, healthy eating. In terms of this application, your officer's report, I think, succinctly deals with the proposal and its merits and addresses all of the issues raised. You have heard that, subject to condition, there are no objections from any statutory consultees. In respect to the comments about heritage impact and the umbrellas, if that is an issue for you, you can obviously condition that out. The site is located in the Greenbelt, but it's in a village infill, as you've heard, is an existing vacant developed site. The existing use on the site, you've heard, is completely unrestricted. It could be used by a different operator on a 24-hour basis. It will provide job creation, circa 9 jobs, and it will make a contribution to the local economy and provide a service to the village to help meet the day-to-day needs in terms of providing bakery provision. We have provided a full sequential assessment, which is focused on Ferndown and West Parley. I know that there's been a comment raised about the KFC unit, which has recently become vacant, but just for the avoidance of doubt, that is not available. The tenant of that signed a 20-year lease in 2012. They had a break clause last year. They didn't option it. They've taken KFC out, and it's going to be rebranded to one of their other fascias. It's probably going to be a Taco Bell. In summary, then, you've got a positive officers committee report, and I thank the officers for that. It is therefore respectfully requested that permission is forthcoming for this proposal, as it does offer social, economic, and environmental benefits to the area, representing sustainable development, and is fully in line with national and development plan policy. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much. Public speaker is Councillor Manson Grove from Ferndown Town Council.
Hello? Working. Okay. Right. I've been a town councillor for Hampreston and Longman for the last 6 years, approximately. And I'm here to represent the residents, not a large corporation. There's several reasons, some have been outlined, but I think there's up to 48 people have complained about this, and they've got a damn good reason why. Greenbelt, simple. If you compare Lownwells, what they had, and actually your photograph was flawed of the car showroom, that shows something which isn't there. That site's been empty for a very long time. Doesn't have any impact on the Greenbelt. This proposal does, because the building in Greenbelt terms, 15 marked parking spaces, 8 fixed benches seating up to 32 people will have a detrimental impact and intrude into the openness of the Greenbelt. Second, noise nuisance. Greg's proposed that a retail outlet operating 7 days a week from 5 to 11, or you might decide on something else, would create unacceptable disturbance to residents, including the residents of Fernhill Dementia Care Home. This is particularly likely if 32 of post covers being made up of outside seating plus the 16 indoor. There's also potential for larger groups congregating at the establishment, which would lead to antisocial behaviour. There's a pub up the road, the White Hart, which I often visit. They actually make their own food, which is very nice. Their seating areas at the rear. Fernhill Care Home provide nursing, dementia and end-of-life care amongst other services. These people want protecting. The residents will be impacted by the associated noise emanating from the proposal. This does not confirm the Safe Policy GB2, where within the village policy envelopes, proposed development must maintain or improve the character and form of the settlement. This doesn't. The proposal certainly does not. Negative impacts on highway safety. Vehicles failing to park, they pull up on pavements nearby. This is a big concern, this one, because I walk up and down Ringwoods Road, drive up and down it. I know the residents' views. Park on the bridleway. There's a bridleway opposite Green Lane. Nobody's mentioned that one. That's an offence to park on those opposite Green Lane. They will use the pub's car park, which is just a little bit up the road. Put other vehicles, cyclists at risk. But pedestrians, but many other wheelchair people have wheelchairs. There's other cyclists in a pinch point. The surrounding roads are highly congested. And I'm sure people know what Ringwood Road is like. More people have probably come to Greg, so it improves, but that's not the worst one. And the proposal would result in significant harms in terms of highways. I disagree with the planning officer, and parking. I will not accord with local policies KS 11 and 12. The applicant claims it will serve motorists already travelling on the A348. In reality, it will lead to an increase in road traffic and pollution throughout the village. That one, okay. The footprint of the existing building is already established along the car park in the front. The inaccuracy I saw is also the distance between listed buildings. I checked on the Magic map. It's not 50 metres.
Can I ask you to sum up? You're now out of time.
Oh, okay. Well, that's about it, really. I'm against it. The residents are against it in Hampreston and Longman. And no, I'd recommend you refuse it for very good reasons. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our last speaker is Councillor Julie Robinson, who is one of the ward members. Again, Julie, you're limited to 3 minutes like everybody else.
Thank you. Councillor Judy Robinson, Ferndale South. What can I say about this application? I'm here to fully support my residents from Longman and Preston. Longman has historic buildings. This application is totally out of character. It's in the Greenbelt. It's going to be adjacent to Fernhill Dementia Home. It's going to be adjacent to historic buildings. There is enough problems in Longman with traffic as it is. Along with extra noise, vehicles will park partly on the pavement. They will park in car parks that aren't part of this application. I say it's totally out of character. Extra noise, litter, odour. It just can't happen. I strongly object to this application. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Sometimes less is more. Okay, I'm going to come back to officers. There've been quite a few issues that have been raised. I'd like to take the opportunity to respond to those. Stay to listen to the response from officers, but as soon as I go into the debate, then you will need to leave the room.
I'll leave the room now.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If we can just do a bit of a double act here, I'll pick up on the issue to mention with highways and the other lines that was raised in one of the speakers. Just to remind members that when we consider planning applications, development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. And I'm quoting that from the National Planning Policy Framework. Officers will consult our highways colleagues to get professional advice, and the advice that we've received is that this is acceptable in highway terms. There have been mention of vehicles parking effectively illegally and the need for double yellows. That's beyond the remit of the application and isn't something that we can consider. And there's been various appeals in the past that have dealt with those sorts of issues, that you have to have faith in the management and regulation of the traffic and highway situation. If people are parking illegally, there are methods for dealing with that which are beyond the control of the planning application. So from that perspective, we cannot refuse it on the basis that somebody may choose to park illegally somewhere else. If they do so, then they're infringing other laws, and there are other mechanisms for dealing with that. So that I think is a relevant point to make here. And I'll hand over to Liz now, if that's okay with you, Madam Chairman, to pick up on some of the other points.
Through you, Madam Chair. Elizabeth Adams. So just picking up on a couple of things that were mentioned. In terms of the character of the area, lighting was mentioned. That isn't something that's subject to a condition that your officers have suggested, but if members considered that that was a concern, then there is the opportunity to condition the details of external lighting and to request that, external lighting of the seating area, for instance, is switched off when it's out of use. So that's something that could be proposed. The road, from my measurements, is about 7 metres outside the application site in width, so it's not unsubstantial. In terms of the need for additional van spaces, that's not something that we would. I think the difficulty there is how to evidence that need, and it's not something that our policy requires. Is about all I can say on that one. In terms of Greenbelt, there was mention to the current site being empty, which it is and has been for a while, but we have to take the impact on the openness from what is the current lawful use. So the lawful use at the moment is a car sales showroom. It could be used as one tomorrow. There need any further planning permissions, and it could have cars across the site, as has previously been seen. So we're also in a situation where the usual Greenbelt requirements that you will be so familiar with are not, they're sort of superseded by, because it's within the village infill area, by GBV2. Now that was mentioned, and obviously there is disagreement about whether GBV2 requirements are met. What I would say is that when we're talking about the form of the settlement and the character of the settlement, in this instance, we're considering the reuse of an existing building, an existing car showroom forecourt, which would already be anticipated to be covered in vehicles. So officers' position is that the proposal would not result in material change to the impact on the settlement compared to the existing lawful use. Thank you. Sir?
Very much for that. Excuse me, that's what I said. Thank you very much for that. Okay, members, I'm now going to turn to you. Alex, if you'd like to start the debate.
Can I ask a couple of questions or clarification? And I'm sure it's in there, but you get a bit sort of, did I catch that right? In the report, Some of the objections are to totems. What's meant by that? Are they flagpoles? Because from that old picture, it looks as though there were already flags up there. I don't know if there were or not on the slide. Yeah, 13, I think, or no, slide 11. Are they the totems, or are the new ones coming, or is it a posh word for umbrellas?
Thank you. Sorry, I did clarify that before. So originally the application included a totem pole sign like you would see at Petrol Forecourt, like we came to before members last meeting. And but that would need separate advertisement consent. That's not something that's before you today because it's not part of the application.
Okay, thank you. The other part is, I'm not against Greggs, they're very handy bakers. How many properties are within walking distance of this place? Roughly. I mean, it doesn't say in the facilities in Longham that there is a bakery.
Through you, Madam Chair. No, Longham has some facilities, including the pub that was already mentioned, the White Hart to the north. There's the other pub by the river to the south. And there are some other businesses in there. It's a smattering of businesses and residential properties all the way through the village. Sorry, I can't give you the numbers.
Okay, and then coming back to the building itself, or the proposed building itself, where would the delivery vans be coming in and out of? Would they be coming in at the top or the bottom? So where are the deliveries coming in and out of? Because they tend to be the noisiest and they come early in the day. And also, where placed are the air conditioning units, heat pumps, fans, all that sort of stuff? On which wall are they? That was a question.
Through you, Madam Chair. The air conditioning units are to the rear, so they are on this elevation to the back. So if we look on here, they're shown in black there. The access, I had a look and I've got somewhere on here, I think. Yeah, so the existing entrance and exits would be retained, and it's 8 metres wide to the north and 6 metres wide to the south. So that 8 metres is actually wider than a highway, according to this plan, and the 6 metres is very similar. So the intention, I think, is to allow a free flow of vehicles because it's wide enough. So there wouldn't be deliveries unless there was a requirement for them to come in a particular access as required by condition could come through either.
It's where they back up to, where do deliveries go into the property? Because it's the opening and shutting of doors and things like that, and they tend to be out of, should we say, opening hours. They tend to be earlier and later.
Really, Madam Chair, apologies. So there's the new external door to the rear, which is being proposed up here. Okay. Will be used. Thank you.
Okay. Berwick Orange, again, can you remind people who you are and where you represent?
It's Berwick Orange, St Medicines and Isewall. This particular road I use quite regularly, so I know it well. It's the main route to Paul Docks, and so it's got very heavy traffic on it. Now, if we give permission for this, then we're going to have these large lorries stopping on the pavement, half on the road, half on the pavement, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. If we don't have yellow lines there, double yellow lines, it's now. In the future, it's difficult to get double yellow lines from my own experience. So
I'm going to stop you there, Barry. Double yellow lines are not within the remit of the planning committee.
So we can't put a
condition.
We can't condition.
No. Yeah, because I've had this locally as a local member in my own area. You have to have the development first. If there is then an issue, you then approach highways and then you start going down that route. Because of the time it takes to put together a traffic regulation order, it's going to take at least 2 years. It's not something we can do through condition.
it would probably take 5 years to get double yellow lines there from past
But in the
experience.
meantime, if it does go ahead and there is an issue, then it's down to enforcement. Was there anything else you wanted to say? Can you turn your mic off? Can you turn your mic off, please? Okay, over to you.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Can you just
Remind them where you've come from.
Sorry, Councillor Shane Bartlett, Wimbledon Ward, manifesto. You just answered one of my questions actually, because I had a little bit of concern around this in terms of highways, and whether any TROs, it would go from what the highways information on this is, that it doesn't need any TROs in it. So that obviously isn't an avenue that we can go down. I was a little bit surprised that in terms of a fast food restaurant, for want of a better term, that this is that such limited parking is actually required, and yet there's quite an open provision of parking that's going to be delivered, which that comes quite a surprise to me. So, first question would be, what infrastructure is in place to mitigate against the seating area being subject to a vehicular impact? And we can see from the slide, there's quite a pinch point between where the disabled places are and where the outside seating area is. And we know that occasionally vehicles aren't necessarily under driver control for whatever reason. I had one recently in Wimbledon, which ended up in a shop front. So I just wondered what infrastructure can be put in place to mitigate that outside seating area to ensure the safety of those customers, please.
Madam Chair, so that the applicants have explained that the external barriers around the seating area, which may look something like this, would be for aesthetic purposes, but that they would have a curb, as is similar to the one that you see in the photograph, which would demarcate the boundary area. But no, they haven't identified a need for particular crash barrier style protection. Thank you.
Could I suggest, Madam Chairman, that as part of the conditions that we insist that the curb height is a sufficient height to try and prevent that collision potential that could occur? Is that possible?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we anticipate that could be added to the condition. There's already condition number 9, which talks about details of boundary treatments, external seating and barriers and associated paraphernalia. So we could include in there the height of the curbing.
Let's go ask, while the car parking is sufficient in terms of highways terms, I'm not convinced it would be in practicalities. Within the curtilage of the area, on that slide, yeah. From the photos, it would appear that the rear of the property is tarmacked, is hard standing. I'm just wondering why the rear of the property isn't safe for car parking as well.
Madam Chair, Elizabeth Adams again. Regs have identified that it's just not necessary for their requirements. One would anticipate that whoever is operating the building, whether it's Greggs or another operator, would wish to provide sufficient parking so that they don't lose trade from people thinking, oh, there's nowhere to park and driving through. So if in the future, it was found that additional parking was necessary, then there is opportunity to the rear, as you've said, unless you wish to impose a condition that says that the rear should only be used by staff until such time as so a variation of condition could come in that then requires additional parking for customers.
We should continue.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure about conditioning that, because I think there is a potential then for causing highways issues with vehicle parking on the highway, which obviously is a driver rather than a planning aspect. Is a driver issue. If I just turn to the acoustic barrier, do we have an assurance that it would be a proven safeguard? Do we have any evidence that we can point to that on any similar site that it would ensure that it works in a way that we would expect it to work?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the proposed barrier fence
to provide a screen for the air conditioning units and the extraction attenuator are both, I think, relatively regular features that the environmental health team deal with, and they have expressed satisfaction that that would achieve the necessary noise attenuation to mitigate impacts. There is a noise assessment which is available on the council's website that you can have a look at if you want to look at the specifics, but it meets all the criteria in terms of the evidence available. Thank you.
Can I come in there, because I've dealt with a local issue where the acoustic fence has not proved adequate, and when I talked to enforcement, the issue was that we didn't have the details in the consent for the construction of the acoustic fence. So if this does go ahead, can we please make sure we have full details of the construction of the fence so that we know exactly how it is going to deal with the issues?
Through you, Madam Chairman, I would suggest then that members may wish to amend condition 7, which currently requires that the barrier fence and the attenuator be installed. So you could add in there prior to first use of the building. We've already got prior to first use of the building that the details be submitted and approved in writing. I'm not sure what additional details would be provided.
I think that's adequate. It's just so that if there are any issues, you know exactly what should have been put in. It's not a grey area. It's just about being tight.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, Shane. Do you want to come back? Then I'm going to go on to David Morgan, Alex, and then.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for clarifying that condition. I've got a comment and then I'd like a clarification. These planning applications are always a little bit disappointing when they come before us and we don't have the materials, we don't have the construction methods. They're not available to us, and particularly with this one, in regards to it being a restaurant area, is that kitchen extraction system, which could impact on the local community. So it's just a comment, really. For me personally, it's always frustrating that we're determining a plan application. We don't have all the details in front of us. It's a bit like my bugbear about flooding, as you know, Madam Chairman. So I just wanted a clarification on something that I believe one of the speakers said, and I might have heard it wrong, but it's about that there's no restrictions on this site, so future proposals coming forward to the site could be more detrimental to the village and the local population. And I take on board that we can't give any weight to that, but I just want a clarification whether that was correct about the site, please.
Through you, Madam Chair. So the current use of the site is a sui generis use of a car showroom. So it can't change from a car showroom, but it could be used as a car showroom that's open 24/7 because there is no condition to prevent them opening all hours of the day and night. I think that was the intention. So that is the baseline use against which we then assess how the new use might cause more or less harm.
Thank you.
David Morgan, sorry it's taken so long to get to you.
Patience is my virtue.
Can you remind people where you're from, please?
Or I'll remind them, yes. Representing Wimborne Minster and capital of East Dorset. My concern, Madam Chairman, is with the care home next door, because I understand that it's part of the northern elevation of this care home actually faces the application site and along its southern boundary, and there is a concern from the care home about the impact certainly on some of the residents. I understand that windows have to be opened because there's no cooling system within inside, and therefore they will get the full benefit of the noise from extraction fans, etc., which, as it's a dementia home, will certainly not be appreciated. So that's my comment, Madam Chairman. I'm concerned about the impact on that, on the neighbours. I mean, I know the road quite well. I've queued there many a time. So I appreciate all the other comments that have been made about highway use, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on now to Alex Brunton. Oh. Sorry, I thought you were a councillor. Can I just bring it back? I mean, like David Morgan, I think the most problematical bit is the neighbouring care home. And I see, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, the extraction fans are sort of round the back, that's not too bad. But there is this gap between the building and the care home, which doesn't appear to be allocated for anything else yet. So in the, what's it called, grant, the conditions, condition number 5, it says a soft landscaping and planting scheme shall be submitted to and approved in writing. It doesn't say for where, and I would strongly suggest that we push any planting to the south side of this, so it is between the care home and the restaurant. Particularly in terms, I mean, I know there's going to be an acoustic fence, but they only do so much. But some of the taller fastigiate trees could be planted along there, which act as air filters and sound filters to upstairs bedroom windows, better than a net curtain, certainly better than a, you know, blackout blind. So I just would like to have more precision about soft landscaping, because very often that just means shove a few shrubs along the front. But what you actually want is something tall with the occasional evergreen that, because the leaves act as air conditioning by cooling the air around them and baffling sound. And I just would like far more precision on that bit, please.
For you, Madam Chair, sorry. If members wished to impose a condition that precisely identified where planting should go, then it still needs to meet all the tests. So it needs to be reasonable, necessary, and necessary for the purposes of making this application acceptable. So there is currently, as you see in this picture, the boundary fence and the whole site is currently tarmacked. So there's currently the only planting area at present is the verge along the front. So I should be using my mouse. So this is a really nice wide grass verge at present, and it's anticipated that additional shrubs and such like in there could provide a better screening of the parking space from the highway. I fully appreciate your suggestion about putting in trees in this area. My concern would be whether there is sufficient appropriate rooting environment that they would be able to take because of the nature of the existing surfacing and proximity of the buildings and potential what's underneath. And also potentially, I fully appreciate the suggestion about baffling and such like, but the noise assessment suggests that wouldn't be necessary in terms of making development acceptable. And I'm slightly concerned about additional loss of outlook from the windows potentially. That's all issues that members could consider. Thank you.
I come back speaking as a horticulturalist. Oh yes, you can. Tarmac can be removed. You can build tree planting pits. Trees aren't just screening, they are air filters, they are cooling. And at a time when we're talking about climate change and issues like that, we need all the green air filtering we can get. And this seems to me like the ideal spot to put it.
A couple of things, I suppose. Firstly, I draw members' attention to the noise assessment, which identified the background levels of ambient noise from the road, and the hours of operation that are being conditioned on this. And I don't say that to deflect from the importance of landscaping. I'm just saying that that would be mechanisms that we would see through the planning application, that we could manage impacts in terms of amenity on the neighbouring care home where I suppose we have a condition that does allow us a degree of flexibility, I suppose, around what kind of landscaping scheme comes before us, and there is a degree of discussion that then can take place between officers and the applicant about securing something that's appropriate. But I suppose what we're saying is at this point it's difficult to say for definite that we would have to be very specific about something there until we know the details of that and how it can be achieved. And in the nature of what we've said, we've got other mechanisms that we believe are sufficient to actually control that. But there is a condition on there, notwithstanding it, which does actually allow us to see what the details of that landscaping scheme are going to be. So I'm sure officers are happy to have those discussions with the applicant around what would be an appropriate mix of landscaping, but there's a proviso there that it obviously has to be capable of delivery in the sense of something you can put there that's going to survive, but equally isn't going to impede access or egress from the site as well. So there would be limitations there in terms of what we could actually put in there, I think.
Point taken, but at the same time, it just says a soft landscaping scheme, and it would be nice if you said, not because it's implied that it'll just be a screen at the front. To the south and the west of the building, at least it would make them think about planting or designing a planting scheme to the south.
Been very challenging this morning, you guys.
That's my subject, sorry.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Just discussing. So my understanding is that Councillor Brenton has suggested that in the second line, so we say prior to the first use of the approved development, a soft landscaping and planting scheme to include or maybe just put in here for the western and southern, including the western and southern boundaries. I think there was also the intention that we would ensure there's a very nice hedge to the rear, so it was just to ensure that that was retained as well.
Yeah.
Are you happy with that? Okay. I should then move on to my next speaker, and that's Robin Cook. I appreciate lots of members now want to speak, and I appreciate your patience.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm quite patient. I'm happy to wait. A lot of what I'm going to say maybe has already been mentioned, but I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on the care home in a moment. But I've got a couple of questions first. I might have missed it in the presentation, forgive me. Any EV charging points included in the layout? And also, if you just remind me, is the southern entrance being open for access, or is that still going to be blanked off as it bollards there at the moment? That's the question. Then I'll have a word about the care home, if I may. Thank
you. Chair. There are no proposals at the moment for EV charging points. That was an inquiry that I made, and we don't currently have a policy that we can acquire them. So that is where we stand for now. Yes, the intention is that both accesses are open. I appreciate there's currently bollards there, and I imagine that they could be used in the future if there was a need to close the site at night, say, but they would be considered to be anticipated to be open during the day.
Okay. Care home, mitigation, sound, etc. This site is going to be likely to be, can't say it for a fact, but it's likely to be predominantly vehicular traffic using it, because there isn't really much in the way of habitation nearby that's likely to use it. So the amount of vehicle movements in and around that site is going to be quite considerable. I'm sure Greggs would hope it would be. And this will go on for a number of hours, which I see have been revised to some way mitigate perhaps the impact on certainly the care home and the residents. The dementia care home, and many of you may have relatives or been involved with people who are living with dementia, and it's an awful, awful disease. And dementia, people living with dementia don't tend to live by the clock. So with the hours, and they have been amended and suggested in conditions, that's fine. It's fine. But there's going to be vehicular movements on a much increased scale to what there is already, there has been in the past. And there will not be regular sleeping times or patterns for these people living with dementia in that care home. So I don't think I'd like to think that Greggs would be a good neighbour, but I don't think, I don't think you could put as many restrictions as you would want to on the applicant, because you would never mitigate enough, I think, in that respect, if you see what I'm saying. So there's any other way, we've got the acoustic fencing, the planting has been mentioned, but if there's any other way that it can condition or I don't know how we do it, that we can Sandville minimise further disruption to those people in that care home. That's not the only issue on this, I know, and I think that the application as such does fulfil a need, although there is a Greggs within half a mile, West Parley, so there's another Greggs reasonably locally. It does fulfil a need, and it reuses a site which otherwise would just probably lay empty. So I've got mixed feelings about this amount, but I'd like a little bit more on what we could or could not do in terms of suggesting further mitigation, etc., for the care home.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the conditions that have been proposed by the officers are those that we consider to meet the tests of necessity and appropriateness and enforceability and such like, in order to make the development acceptable in this context. And we've taken into account that the neighbours have sensitivities, but we also have to respond to the evidence that's been provided to us, which says that the background noise provided by the road is so significant that actually the additional harm caused by vehicle movements through the site wouldn't result in a level of harm that can be identified, as it were. And so, with the exception of the battling suggested by the trees, suggested by Councillor Benton, members, I don't have any magic bullet, I'm afraid. That answers your question.
That's the answer I expected, to be honest with you. But I mean, this is a concern. My major concern with this, and I said, Madam Chair, at the beginning, I personally don't have a problem with what's going in there. It is how it's managed and the impact really on that care home. The highway we talk about, we know we can deal with that in retrospect if we need to. But I just worry about the increase in anxiety it may cause amongst those people. Okay, thanks.
I need to move on. We'll try. You've been very patient.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Bill Tripe to Swanage. I endorse the concerns articulated by David Morgan and then taken on a bit further by Robin Cook just now. But in addition to that, two of the concerns that have been mentioned by the speakers, by the public speakers, have not so far been mentioned. One of them is protection of the green belt, necessity for, and the concern about being out of character with the area. I confess I do not know the area very well, but can you tell me, or can somebody tell me, why those two concerns should not necessarily be given the greatest weight? That is the green belt and the character of the area, because more widely endorse it. I personally believe that these two priorities are absolute if we're going to be able to recognise this county at any time in the next 40 years. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give a response to that.
Thank you, Chair. Elizabeth Adams. So, yes, Greenbelt's very important, often comes before members, doesn't it? But this is a village infill area, identified as such by the local planning policies. It's identified as a place where activity can happen. And the proposal before you is for the reuse of an existing building. So the form of the building is not changing. The only thing that's changing is an external seating area with umbrellas and the existing use of the building for the sale of cars would already be associated with paraphernalia associated with selling cars, lots of cars on forecourt. So the change from what's existing use to the proposed use is not considered to result in harm to the two are almost correlated in policy, because policy DBV2 says that you can develop in the infill area as long as it's in accordance with the character of the infill area, and your officers have determined that the proposal is not out of character with what is already there. There's already a commercial site adjacent to a commercial site. The differences would not result in substantial harm to the character of the area, and because it's within the village infill area, there's no harm identified to openness compared to the existing use.
I think you've answered well the point about the green belt. I'm not quite so sure about the point about character, but anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. I'm going to move on now. My next speaker is Mike Barron. Thank you for your patience.
My goodness, thank you. I've travelled along this road many times, and it gets very busy. My concern is that if anyone travelling towards Ferndown wants to go to the bakery, they're going to try to cross the other traffic going towards the bridge. That is really going to slow down traffic even more, and it's something I think we've got to think about. Has anyone any idea of what they're going to do? Because as soon as the traffic stops, there'll be a build-up. The person goes into the bakery, and then wishes to go forward and back onto the main road that goes to Ferndown. It's going to be horrendous.
Through you, Madam Chair. There's already pre-existing commercial use of the site, so there was already be anticipated to be cars going in and out. There's already the dementia care home that has cars going in and out to the south. There's already Landwell Motors to the north that has cars going in and out. As we've heard, it is known to be quite slow-moving traffic at times, so that enables vehicles to move more smoothly. But ultimately, I just have to bring you back to the fact that the council's highways team have assessed the proposal, and they do not consider that there would be. I mean, the National Planning Policy Framework has a really high bar for refusing applications on the basis of harm. It has to be it has to be significant, really significant impact on the highway network to justify refusal on that basis. That would be my response. Thank you.
Again, I think the difficulty you've got is the existing use and the fact that traffic has been turning right in and out of the site.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to come back to Shane, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And it's been, I think, quite an exhaustive debate. A lot of questions asked, a lot of answers given. I take into consideration the 48 objections that there are, the local parish council objection as well. But when you look at the officer's report and the way that's laid out, and it ends at 3.13 with there are no material considerations that would warrant refusal, we all know that we deal with planning as a statute planning law. The emotions go out of it, and we have to deal with what we've got in front of us. There is, as I said earlier, when I asked for the clarification, well, we can't give it weight. There is a risk that this site could be used that would be far more detrimental to that care home that's adjacent to it, and to probably to the local populace within that village, should that be a 24-hour car industry facility going forward. I think the arguments that are laid out within the report, I think, are acceptable. Nobody really likes change, but change happens. I'm also mindful of the fact that I couldn't find it in the report again. It's annoying because I normally write down the page and the paragraph number that it is. But one of these planning considerations I note was around driving economy, local economy, as part of the planning consideration, and it's going to deliver. I think it was 5 full-time employment positions. which I think has to be taken into consideration as well. So I think on merit, Madam Chairman, taking all those things into consideration, and I propose that we accept the opposite recommendation to grant. Thank you.
Okay. As I'm being prompted what I was going to do. Nobody trusts me, obviously. When we spoke earlier, or when you spoke earlier, you were concerned about the curb height, which was going to be added to condition 9. And you were also concerned about the acoustic barrier, condition 7, with the details being approved. And also we were looking at the landscaping condition and changing the wording on that. Does your proposal to grant include all 3 of those amendments?
Madam Chairman, yeah, remiss of me, it does. Thank you.
Okay, is there a seconder, please? Alex, thank you. Do I have any more speakers on this application? Robin, quickly, please.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Just one more thing, if I may, come in on that. Is there any, or can we conditional informative note about maybe closing the car park some way after hours, outside of hours, to stop it, misuse of it outside of hours?
We've done that in other commercial applications. Yes.
I anticipate that would be after the 9 o'clock when the deliveries are finished.
Yes, Madam Chairman, outside of operating hours then, I should say. Thank you.
Are you happy with that as an additional condition?
Madam Chairman, yeah, I am aware that we have done that previously. There was an application in Upton that we did that. And so, yeah, I'm happy to accept that as a further condition. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so with those conditions that we've just gone through, proposed and seconded, those in favour of grant, please. 1, 2, 3. Those in favour, sorry, those against? 1, 2, 3. Abstentions? 1. Therefore, that falls to Chairman's casting vote, and I will vote in favour of the recommendation. So the application is granted with the additional conditions that we've added with this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
In the afternoon session on the 12th.
Right. We're now moving on to agenda item 10, which is service to Marshall Golf Club. I'm aware that time is rushing on, and we still have 3 applications to deal with. So, without further ado,
You're not here to give something. Oh, right. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this application is to retain a single-storey changing room building at Sturminster Marshall Golf Club on Moor Lane. Hopefully members are aware of Sturminster Marshall's location. The golf club lies to the east of the village, and relevant policies are provided by Christchurch and East Dorset local plan. The site forms part of an established 9-hole golf course, and it's in the green belt adjacent to the urban area. So you just see here it's allocated as recreational open space in the local plan. The golf course benefits from a clubhouse, which was granted in 1991 that you see in this picture, and it's subsequently been extended to provide more storage space. In 2009, permission was granted for a small classroom and a cover for the practice range. And then to the south of this practice range and classroom, there are a number of storage facilities in the form of garaging and containers, and there's a water tank. The proposal is to retain a further building constructed to provide changing facilities. So you see here in the photographs. The building incorporates 2 changing areas here with a separate shower facility. The structure is approximately 3 metres high and has a floor area of about 28 square metres. The Parish Council has raised an objection to the application on the basis that the proposal would harm the openness of the greenbelt, and they do not consider that the proposal is necessary, as they consider that facilities could be provided within the clubhouse. So under greenbelt policy in the National Planning Policy Framework, the provision of appropriate facilities for outdoor sport or recreation are allowed, provided that they preserve the openness of the greenbelt and do not conflict with the purposes of including land within the greenbelt. The building is, as you see, quite modest in scale, and it's situated or sited rather within a cluster of the existing structures on the site. So down here, this is the public footpath that crosses the site, and Parish have mentioned that the building can be seen from this public footpath as well as to the south. However, whilst it has a spatial and visual presence that all buildings do in the greenbelt, officers consider it does not result in material harm to the wider openness of the greenbelt in this location, nor does it represent harmful encroachment into the countryside due to its position there adjacent to all the other buildings. The main consideration is therefore whether the facility is appropriate. The applicant's agent has explained that the building is needed because the existing toilet and changing facilities within the clubhouse are cramped and there's no accessible or staff toilet facility, as you can see here. There's the women's and the men's. The proposed changing facilities provide modern arrangements with full height cubicles that are accessible and gender neutral. The facilities are the minimum necessary to meet legal requirements for the workers on the site. There are separate proposals to extend the clubhouse, which are under, well, there's an extant permission and there's an application that's currently at appeal. And these include the provision of new toilet facilities, which would meet the HSE guidance for workplace provision. But the applicant contends that adding changing facilities into the design of the clubhouse would affect the club's viability, as it would negatively impact on the size of the restaurant area. Their contention is that the club relies on revenue from the clubhouse, including the restaurant, to remain viable. No evidence of this has been provided to support this contention, and it would be officers' preference for all the changing facilities to be provided in the main clubhouse. However, we can only consider, again, the proposal as submitted. And if you look again at paragraph 149 of the framework, the provision of appropriate facilities is allowed within the greenbelt. So the building has enabled the provision of modest and appropriate changing facilities associated with the use of the land for golf. So ultimately, officers do not consider that it would be reasonable to refuse planning permission in this instance. There are no other material planning considerations that would necessitate refusal. So the recommendation is that permission be granted, and there's just a condition that the existing materials be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one public speaker for that, and that's Darren Howells. Morning. Thank you for bearing with us this morning. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. I am pleased that your planning officer has provided you with a recommendation to approve following a robust assessment of the application against local and national planning policy, in particular the Greenbelt. As you will be aware, the National Planning Policy governs Greenbelt policy. Paragraph 149B, as you've heard, allows for the erection of buildings provided that it is used for the provision of appropriate facilities for outdoor sport. Golf is clearly such an activity. The proposed changing room is about 28 square metres, which is just over the area of space taken up by 2 car parking spaces side by side. It's not a large building. The height of the building is single story, and the exterior shall be clad in timber to accord with other buildings within the locality and respect the semi-rural setting of the site. Due to the small nature of the proposal, in my professional opinion, there is no visual harm that will occur. The justification for the building is set out in the paragraphs 15.11 to 15.19 of your officer's report. I'm pleased that the conclusion is that the recommendation is to approve and that the proposal, in your officer's opinion, will not prejudice the openness of the Greenbelt, and I would ask you to endorse their recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anything that officers wish to respond? Okay, members, I'm moving to you now. First speaker is Shane Bartlett.
Madam Chairman. Can I just go for a first point on a clarification at 3.8? And I know it's part of the planning considerations we've got from us. I just wanted to get an understanding around it. It talks about foul water disposal, and is that being tankered off the site at the moment?
through you, Madam Chair, Elizabeth Adams. I can't answer that, I'm afraid. I don't have the details. That would be a building control thing, unless you can tell me otherwise. Yeah, a matter for building control rather than planning. Thank you.
Yes, reasoning for my question is that when we saw the photos, we could see the layout of the site. And I understand this has been a lot of retrospective planning that's gone on this site. And it's starting to look a bit like a dog's breakfast, for want of I don't know what the planning technical term would be. The layman's term is it's looking a bit like a dog's breakfast. It's not conducive to being very visibly aesthetic. It might tick with you, and obviously it's a subjective view. So there's a little bit of a concern around that. Which is why I asked the question, because it doesn't seem like there's much forethought going in, and it just seems to be that it's knee-jerk reactions to we need this bit, we need this building, we need to, an addition here, and it's all sort of being acquired on site. And it doesn't seem to be any strategic plan around it. But I just move on. It says in the report that this is visible from footpath to a Moor Lane, and I suspect my colleague next to me will probably be pleased to hear this coming from me. I'm just wondering whether, as part of the condition, there could be tree planting around this to mitigate the views being as it is in the green belt. I take that footpath 2 is a public right of way, a footpath, and therefore I know what around footpaths is that you shouldn't be doing anything that is going to mitigate the enjoyment of and the aspect of the landscape and the views for users using those footpaths. So I just wondered, under a condition, whether there would be suitable tree screening around this to basically help hide it from public view. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. With respect, I would suggest that it would be difficult to say that a condition requiring tree planting would be necessary to make this development acceptable. Mostly because of its very modest size and because of the use of the wood cladding, which assists in limiting the visual impact. You can see there that the footpath is some distance away. So what you see within the viewpoints is a distant, modest extension to an existing line of structures.
Would it be possible to put it in as an advisory note then, should this application be approved? Is that reasonable?
Yeah, Chairman. Well, it wouldn't be enforceable. There would be nothing we could do about that. All it would be doing is putting something on. And I would just echo what Liz has said about we'd have to consider the reasonableness of any conditions as to whether or not they were necessary and met the tests. And I find it very difficult to say that that was an issue that we could actually justify in this particular case. So if we put an informative on there, I'm not sure what it would actually achieve if I was advising members, because there isn't something there that we could actually use to enforce against should they opt not to do anything on it.
Yeah, I fully understand if it was an advisory or informative note, it's not enforceable, but it sows the seed in the mind of the owners of the club. And as like Madam Chairman, I've got no further questions.
The agent is here. I think he hears what you say.
Okay.
It's up to him whether he takes that on board. Does anyone else wish to speak on this application? Robin, you're the local member.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm the ward member. Lots of applications coming and going for this site over a number of years, and I will say, in my view as a member, we're lucky to have this facility. This golf club is very, very good, very well served. The 9-hole course, and it suits a variety of diverse users, and it's very good in that respect. They've tried to upgrade various parts of it, and I think what Councillor Bartlett said about dog's breakfast is probably, in another term, urban creep, possibly. I don't know. This is the risk here with this. The existing facility within the restaurant area, within the main, it doesn't sit well with me. It does need to be better. I understand that it is an alternative coming on another application that was mentioned. I'm not sure is the answer. I'm not sure. I would like to think, yes, we should allow them to go ahead and approve this and give them the opportunity to provide much better facilities for the visitors and members. There is no evidence that enlarging the restaurant, the usage, etc., agreed with that, but they are trying to make more usage of the site, and if it can be encouraged in a satisfactory way, then I would support that. I think on balance, the main objection that has been on this, in fact, the only objection I think is the parish council, what they've said about the impact on the green belt and the view, etc. I don't think that's such a great issue. There will be some impact, and on balance, I'm happy to move that we accept the recommendation. Yes, an informative note, and as you've said, it will be read and it will be listened to the comments at this meeting. So I think that should go in about some form of additional screening for it. But as a facility, I think it serves a purpose, an improved purpose onto what they've already got for members. So propose to grant. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder, please? Shane?
Madam Chairman, I'm from the Mark Twain School of Golfing. If anybody doesn't know what that is, it's good walk spoil. We do have policies within Dorset Council about health and wellbeing, mental health and wellbeing, physical wellbeing, to try and encourage and increase our population in Dorset of being more healthy, more active. And I'm told that golfing does this, so not being an expert in the field, obviously for the reasons I've given. And I'm happy to second this. I do hope that the owners of the site do take on board the informative note they're going to put to it. But I'm happy to second the application in front of us with the conditions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. My only comment would be that this is a retrospective application, and we've not been advised of any issues from the presence of that building in planning terms. So I'll just leave that there for you to ponder. So I'm now going to move to the vote. The application has been proposed for grant and duly seconded as per the officer recommendation. Those in favour, please. Seven. Those against? Abstentions? One. Therefore, the application is granted. Thank you. Okay. I'm very aware of the time, and normally I would stop for comfort break, but we have 2 applications left. We did say at the beginning of the meeting that we would give Liz a break. The next application is going to be Westmoreland Middle School. The only reason this is coming to committee is because it's Dorset Council owned land. It's not contentious, so I only expect it to take a couple of minutes. So I am of course dependent on my committee. And presenting this will be Claire Hicks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The proposal before you is to raise the roof by adding insulation to the flat roof and replacing roofing tiles and fixtures at Westmoreland Middle School. The lower roof would be raised by approximately 25 centimetres and the overall roof would be raised by approximately 21 centimetres. It is brought before you because it is on council-owned land. The application site is located to the south of Westmoreland. Application site outlined in red is located on land owned by the council, shown green on the left side of the screen. On the right is the same plan enlarged, which identifies that the school lies within the urban area of Westmoreland, where development is acceptable in principle, in accordance with the local plan policy KS2. As you can see from the elevation plans, there will be very limited change. The increase in height will be discernible, but will retain the existing design. As set out in the officer's report, the main considerations are the impact on the character of the area and impact on neighbouring amenity. Regarding the impact on the character and appearance, the proposed installation of the roof will have minimal visual impact.
The school building is set back in its plot, and the modest increase in the height of the building can be accommodated without any harmful impact on the character and appearance of the area in accordance with policy HE2. Regarding the impact on neighbouring amenity, the application site lies in the residential area of West Moors. The nearest properties to the proposed development are 6A Elmhurst Road to 20 Elmhurst Road, which is along here, and 2 Heathfield Way and 2A Heathfield Way, which are to the west of the site. The nearest dwellings on Elmhurst Road has approximately 16 metres between the school building and the western boundary, and approximately 35 metres building to building. The area outlined in blue is owned by the council and is not part of this application. Whilst there may be some disturbance for neighbours during the construction period, this will be for a limited duration and no demonstrable harm is anticipated. The photos at the top are from the applicant, and the photos on the left are from Google Maps. The application is accompanied by a negative bat check certificate. No bats were found to be using the building, but future external lighting should be bat friendly to avoid harm to bats that may use on-site habitats for foraging and commuting. The lighting criteria set out in the bat certificate can be secured by condition to accord with policy ME1. An informative note will also be added, encouraging the installation of bird and bat boxes. In summary, the proposed development will not result in harm to the character of the area or neighbouring amenity, subject to a condition to secure the lighting criteria set out in the bat certificate. For the above reasons, the application is found to accord with the development plan and approval is recommended.
Thank you very much, Claire. We have no public speakers on this application. My first speaker is Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Shane Bartlett, Ward Member for Wimborne. As is always with these sites, concerning schools, concerning property or land owned by Dorset Council, it comes to this committee to do the openness, honesty and transparency aspect. And it was received before us. There have been no objections. The principle of development is acceptable. The scale, design, impact on character and appearance is acceptable. The impact on the amenity is acceptable. And in raising the roofs by 250mm on one roof and 210mm on the other roof, it's going to have such a negligible impact on the local area that I'm happy to propose, Madam Chairman, that we accept the officer recommendation and the conditions laid out in the report and the appointed notes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second for this one? David Morgan, you wish to speak?
Not particularly, Madam Chairman. I still represent Wimborne. As my friend over there has said, and having read all the documentation, I can see no problems with this. If it's insulated the roof, we do like to keep our pupils warm. That's why I second it.
Thank you. Barry, you indicated to speak. Was that to second or do you wish to speak to the application? Okay. I've no further speakers. It's been proposed and seconded as per the officer's recommendation. Those in favour of grant, please. Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so going back to agenda item 8, which we deferred from the beginning of the meeting, 10 Court Road, Swanage. I'll hand over to Liz to.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So members will recall, hopefully, this one. If you weren't here last committee, you will have still seen the site. So the application.
Sorry, Liz, I'm going to have to stop you there just for a second. I've just been prompted at 10 to we will hit our 3. Sorry, it's 10 to at 1 o'clock we will hit our 3 hours Members, can I have your permission that we extend the meeting as necessary to deal with this application? Thank you. Sorry, Liz.
Thank you. So this application comes to committee because of the concerns raised by the parish council, by members and neighbours. We know where the site is, so we've all visited. Just a reminder that it's to the west of the conservation area. And the property is the end of terrace 2-storey dwelling with the proposal to extend to the rear, shown in grey here, but it would be now a 2-storey extension across the rear and a dormer window to the rear as well. So within the urban area, the extensions are acceptable in principle, but the main considerations have been about neighbouring amenity, and that's the reason that members attended the site visit. Just a reminder of what the property looks like from the front. So no concerns about harm to the AONB landscape because of the tight nature of the development, nor to the conservation area because there's no changes to the front. To the rear, you'll recall that there's an existing single-storey projection shared with number 12 Court Road. It's proposed that this is expanded to form a 2-storey, 3-metre deep extension with a relatively flat roof. Additional living space will be provided at ground floor, that you see here, in addition to the existing extension. And then over that new footprint, got bedroom, and to the roof, it's proposed to add the dormer. This would facilitate the provision of a separate toilet room. The proposed 2-storey extension, 5.2 metres high, as I say, sort of mainly flat, slightly angled roof here. And is to be finished with matching materials. The dormer itself departs from the existing materials because it's to be finished with zinc and larch boarding. The main considerations raised by objectors are the impacts on neighbours in relation to their amenity from light loss and overbearing impact and overlooking. So in relation to overlooking, there is a significant level of pre-existing mutual overlooking for the properties in that area. Properties on Princess Road to the rear have erected a high fencing that we saw when we walked along the path here. The proposal could increase the perception of overlooking for 25 and 23 Princess Road to the rear particularly, as a result of the proposed dormer at the second floor and the repositioned windows at the first floor 3 metres into the plot. But with approximately 18-metre window-to-window separation maintained, and given the existing degree of overlooking, it's not considered that the additional change would result in significant harm. These are the pictures from the first floor window that we previously showed, and you can see here that overlooking is mitigated to some extent by intervening boundaries and buildings. Also by the topography, because 17B Princess Road is a lot lower. And then this was the view, just to remember that the majority of you, I think, saw from visiting the property, the hills in the background, and then you see the roofs and the windows of the neighbouring properties. To the north of the application site, number 8 Court Road and 17B Princess Road, which are low level as previously explained, and the proposed 2-storey extension will increase the bulk of the dwelling for the 3-metre projection, but no harmful overbearing impact or loss of light has been identified due to the relative setback of the 2 dwellings, the separation provided by the rear access path and the high retaining wall, and the angled number 8 slightly away from the application site. Some overshadowing of the rear conservatory may arise in the afternoon during winter months, but again, this will be limited by angles and distances involved. So overall, it's not judged to result in harm that would warrant refusal. To the south of the application site, number 12 Court Road, which was the garden that you also entered, is on slightly higher land. It already has a modest 2-storey extension and a single-storey ground floor projection that's attached to the neighbour at number 10. There's also a shed behind the single-storey element, which I've highlighted in blue on this plan here. It's recognised that the proposed two-storey extension will exacerbate the tunnelling effect currently experienced by ground and first floor windows, but the outlook from the ground floor windows is already significantly compromised by existing built form. And at first floor level, the position of the bedroom window relative to the roof and its height and position to the north is not anticipated to result in harmful loss of light or an overbearing impact. So in summary, within the context of the tight urban grain that you saw when you went on site and existing levels of overlooking, officers have not identified demonstrable loss of amenity for neighbours that would justify refusal. The proposals have been judged to accord with policy D, and approval is recommended subject to the conditions on page 54 of the agenda. I say 54, it's probably not 54 anymore, is it? That's probably last time, but 56 and 57. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We have no public speakers on this application. There is one thing I do need to draw members' attention to. Members who attend the site visits will be aware of the council site visit protocol that does not allow for any debate on a site visit. As such, you must not take into account anything that was said by the ward member in the garden of the next door neighbour to Court Road. So I'm now going to ask members who wishes to speak on this application. Alex.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always speaking. I would say we enjoyed the site visit, but it was really quite interesting. And particularly, I mean, having driven down that road many a time and, you know, just forgotten about those little houses, you realise how tightly packed they are at the back. But it was quite interesting when we walked round the path that goes around the back of them. When you looked up, how many other houses did have upstairs windows, dormer windows, some of which were glazed, some of which weren't. So obviously overlooking is sort of part of the way you live there up to a point, because they are small gardens, but they were very blocked in. In some ways, what concerns me more is the second, you know, the fact that it's an extension across the back of the house and going up with a flat roof, which makes it quite a bulky house compared with the others. So therefore, I don't know if it's actually overlooking so much as sort of imposing bulk, particularly to the house. I think it's number 8, which is the one across the other side of the track, other side of the path. This is an issue more than I thought it would be when I first went. And I can understand that's right. The 4 meters to number 8, that's going to make that track very much a little tunnel. And because that is to the north, that side is going to get not much sun at all in the summer, no, even in the summer, because it is just sort of blocked in. The looking back towards 25, I don't see as so much of a problem, but I can imagine that the ones that are still in the same terrace would feel encroached. But is this sort of what you sort of expect in this area? I mean, you know, they're buying small houses with windows, and every house now wants more light than they used to want. But of course, that is then imposing on other houses. In the days you lived in a little dark cottage, perhaps it wasn't an issue, but you can understand how the upstairs, they would like a dormer window up there because that would let so much more light into the house. So I am very, what's the word, on the fence on this one. There's a lot of fences there.
Okay, my next speaker is Shane Bartlett, then Bill Tribe.
Thanks, Chair. I've just got the one question really. When you say total objections within the report, and it says 8, is that 8 individuals or 8 properties that those objections have come from?
Through you, Madam Chair, 8 properties.
Yeah, excellent report as always, and the site visit was hugely beneficial. And I think what it showed when I visited, we went upstairs into the roof space. That standing in what is presently the window there is there at the moment. That extension, to my mind, isn't going to create an additional risk for the privacy when you stood up against it and you looked at it. I can't imagine from the way that was proposed, it's going to be a great deal difference. I think the difference will be really negligible. There's already overlooking there, and we've seen from, again, sorry, I didn't write down the slide number, but we'll see from the photo that was built to the left of the site that look out across the gardens. It is what it is. It's an undulating landscape. Some properties are lower than others. There is always going to be overlooking. You buy those properties, I'm guessing, with the view and the knowledge that you're not going to have absolute privacy. It's a very constrained site, very densely populated, a lot of buildings in the area, and on that undulating landscape where some are higher and lower than the others, as I said. I take note that in the report, the applicant took pre-application advice, which is commendable. They've gone about it the right way. And the concerns, I think, from Swanage Council, in my view, for the most part, have been addressed within the report. So, Madam Chairman, I don't have a great deal of issues over this application, and I'm minded to support your clarification. I won't go with the proposal at the moment because I gather you've got the members that want to speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker is Bill Tright.
Thank you, Chairman. Bill Tright, Swanage. Could I just ask a question first and come back in a couple of speakers' time to say a bit more? I just want to ask a question. Could we put up there, please, the existing rear of number 10? Right. Now, forgive me if I've got the terminology wrong, but that window that is in the roof of number 10 there, that's it. I don't think the proportions were quite like that. As I remember, it was narrower and less deep than that. When I went up there, I found I had to actually go on to tiptoe to look out, and it was very difficult to overlook, for instance, the garden next door. And I must say that when that becomes that large, if and when that becomes that large dormer window, am I right in thinking it will be further forward? Am I right in thinking that that dormer window will be further forward than the existing window is at the moment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you can probably see on here it's about a metre further forward than the window would be at the moment.
It will be. But then my observation arising from the answer to that question is that it will be a lot easier and in fact almost unavoidable at times to overlook the next garden from that window. But I just wanted to make sure I had the correct window right and the terminology right, and I would like to come back, if I may, with other thoughts in a short while. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, speak to me.
I will.
Robin.
I'll make something up, Chairman, if necessary. No, seriously.
Get to us where you're from.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Where you from? Yeah, I got so clouded up this morning. I'm sorry, forgive me. Robin Cook, Stour and Allen Vale Ward. Thank you. Question about the dormer. I've asked this previously. Site visit. Can it be done under permitted development, please?
The answer is no, because it's within the area of outstanding natural beauty.
Okay. Yeah, it's a question that I think said about people's expectations when they live in that sort of environment. And yes, you are going to get overlooking. And I did go up to that floor and stood where possibly the door was going to be. And yes, you did get a clearer view of other properties. You can't argue with that. You did. Whether that adds to the overall difficulty within that area, because everything seemed to be very crammed in around there, and it's all very contained. And you get the feeling anyway, if you're in the garden, that you're being overlooked from the other properties as a matter of course. So that is part of the thing that you accept, as has been said, when you're living in that environment. There's always a need to expand with this sort of property, to make them bigger, to make them more light, as been said, or to give people more space as well, more living space, rather than move house. Sometimes that's better to do. If you've lived in the place a long time as well, it's quite nice perhaps to do that. On balance, we've covered the question of the glazing, because I think we put the condition in about part glazing on that, the bathroom side, obviously. I think there's not likely to be somebody on the outside looking in. However, that's a help. So there won't be that much window to look out of. How do we stand? This is under building regs, I suppose, about the fire issue. I'll come back in a moment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There will be obviously the need to comply with the building control regulations. My understanding, it's not something that I check part of the planning assessment.
It will be building regs.
Yeah, but yeah, okay, because that's an obvious thing. I mean, getting up those stairs is bad enough. Getting down, I mean, it'd probably be quicker, but there is only the one way other than through the window. It's a fully opening window onto the flat roof and so on, I assume. Right, set them up there, haven't I? I can't really see any reasons anywhere in that report, which was a very good report and a very good site visit as well, to recommend approval, because it's going to give a lot of advantage to the rest of the property and minimum disadvantage, if any, to other residents in the area. So I'm going to propose it. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Who wanted to come back, Shane?
Let's go after Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I concur with my colleague, Councillor Cook. It was an excellent report. Having done the site visit, which was extremely beneficial, as things are laid out in the report, I'm happy to second the proposals on the table. I can see any material planning considerations that warrant refusal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, that was short and sweet. Bill, over to you.
Thanks, Chairman. Bill Trout, Swanage Ward. First, I can say that if things are crammed enough now, then there's no justification in making it worse. But the first thing I wanted to say was that those who know Swanage well know that the owners of these few houses, half a dozen houses that sort of march up Court Hill, those owners, whether they are owner-occupiers, there's a mix now, owner-occupiers, those who are renting out, and second homers, an even mix of those. And you know that over the course of many years, people in those houses have behaved very much as good neighbours towards each other, and been very careful not to upset each other unnecessarily, and have followed a path of mutual understanding and restraint when it comes to matters like planning, which could otherwise adversely affect others in the row quite easily. Now, unfortunately, the sheer size and scale of this proposed extension in relation to the size of the existing house from which the extension is coming, that sheer size and scale, if granted, could have a most unfortunate counter effect, which some people these days describe as a race to the bottom. And that means in this context that would promote development scrum that will end up destroying both the physical and the interpersonal well-being in this small grouping of dwellings. I've mentioned the concern that I have, and I know the other residents there have, about that dormer window being very difficult to not use to overlook people, whereas the existing window, you have to strain yourself to actually oversee next door. But my main concern, though, is the sheer scale and size of the extension on quite a vertically narrow house, which would greatly reduce the light to number 12 in particular, as well as seriously overlooking that house and really boxing it in. From the garden of number 12, this becomes so obvious how light will be excluded and that boxing in, that physical hemming in effect, way beyond what it is at the moment, and a really bad development for those who are subject to it. As I say, you can see it very clearly from the garden in number 12, but not only is it unfair to the neighbour, those particular neighbours, but it adversely affects the character of the area, which is very close to Court Farm, the original house in that area, the old Court Farmhouse, which is a couple of doors away, and indeed the conservation area over the road. Overlooking and that loss of light and amenity would also adversely affect other houses in the not just in this row, but in Kings Road West in particular. We've mentioned that, and that is borne out by some of the objections that we've received from people in the nearby streets. And they range well beyond number 12. May I quote, if I could, from the pre-application advice, if you'll bear with me just a moment, that was issued by Dorset Council on this application. And what it said was, it talks about the dormer. The dormer would visually dominate and overwhelm the roof space, appearing out of keeping with the existing house. It would not be viewed as a harmonious addition to the existing building and will be harmful to the character and appearance of the area. I cannot put it any better than that, and that is exactly what will happen. Now, it is out of scale, it is out of proportion. I can honestly say that I don't think I've ever seen such a damaging case of overlooking, blocking of light, and boxing in for the size of the buildings concerned. I really have not. I would describe it, frankly, as antisocial. It's a very bad thing for Swanage. It has been resisted in the past, and it's a terrific shame about what I believe is now about to happen. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think the officers might need to respond to some of the comments that you've made.
I need to draw members' attention to the paragraph 1610, just to explain how the applicant responded to that pre-application advice by reducing the size of the dormer by over 2 metres and altering the proposed materials, which led officers to conclude that the dormer was now in proportion with the scale of the roof. Thank you.
That's a large.
Thank you. Thank you.
The one that I'm worried about.
Julie Robertson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very quickly, is there any chance of going back to the photographs showing the rear of 16 and 18? Just very briefly.
So that's,
Yeah, see that.
As number 18 done exactly the same? No.
That's a one.
Oh,
that one.
is that a first floor extension or not?
It's a 2-story extension, but obviously it's much narrower.
Right, so it doesn't go the full width of the property. So I'm struggling with these glasses to see it properly on there. I do apologise. Right. But there has been an extension of sorts. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I have no further speakers. It's been proposed for grant and seconded as per the officer recommendation. Those in favour, please. 5. Those against? 2. Abstentions? 1. Therefore, the application is granted. Thank you. If I can now bring you back to the agenda, members, because normally I forget to do this, but today I haven't. We have agenda item 12, urgent items. There are none, and agenda item 13, exempt business. There is none. Therefore, at 13:15, I will close the meeting and thank you for bearing with us.